Unbelievable. Okay. Quitting Zoom. Restarting the browser. Seriously? Unbelievable. Oh, lovely. I was just streaming. Ha. All right. Hello, everybody that's out there. We are encountering just a little bit of a challenge with Zoom, and we are in the process of debugging this. So if you can very patiently just sit tight for a second, I'm absolutely positive we're going to get this resolved. In any case, we have an amazing show for you this evening. We've got Michael Pope, aka Saint Pope, and Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects. We're going to be going into a level of gear geekery as soon as we can get this little Zoom thing worked out. Genius here decided it would be a really good idea to restart the computer just so there wouldn't be any computer-related issues, and for whatever reason, we're having a little bit of an issue getting everybody into the meeting room, which is an interesting phenomenon because I've been on and off Zoom the entire day. In any case, what I would love for you to be able to do for me is to take a moment and, first of all, let me know where it is that you're coming from. We're going to call this, I don't know if it's necessarily, first of all, hello to everybody that's there. I am seeing you in the feed there. With great pleasure, Jack. Thanks so much. If you guys would do me a favor, let me know where it is that you're coming from. And as I am in the process of kind of doing a little bit of tech support stuff here, I'm going to attempt to give you my relatively undivided attention, but at the same time, just say, you know what? Super excited that you're here. And the thing that's really exciting about this for me is that I absolutely love gear. And I love the idea of being able to geek out with two folks that are as capable in using that gear as these two folks are. So in a moment, and you know what you can do? This is the worship musician imprint for the worship guitar show. So do me a favor. You can pray for a second here. That would be awesome because I'm sure we're going to get this ironed out in a matter of moments, but it's a very strange thing that Zoom has decided to do. And in any case, so do me a favor here. As you're kind of watching here, I'm going to be listening and paying attention and simultaneously debugging this. There we go. And I'm over here on edit video, and I'm making sure that we're live over here on YouTube. And we're going to make sure that we're live. There we go. Public, done. Save, done. All right. First of all, thank you so much. Loud and clear, excellent. Thanks so much. Terry, good to see you. Tim, hello. Gary, hello. Richard, Ontario, nice. I understand it's starting to get nice and warm up above the border. 35 folks. I actually am very calm because you know what? I think just about everyone in here has had some sort of streaming debacle. So let me see when I can't get going over here with these guys and get them on the stream here. First of all, one of the other things you can do is you can ask some geeky gear questions. We're going to be talking about stuff like wet, dry, wet. What is the true definition as it came back from the 80s with the guys with the big giant refrigerator-sized racks? What wet, dry, wet really was, going through signal chains, all sorts of cool stuff. So let me see what I can't do here and make the world a better place in the streaming universe. So let me just spend my full attention on this. And we're believing that God willing is going to get this little thing solved over here. And I really appreciate your patience. The good news is I'm not actually sweating because, you know, the funny thing is that we do these things that we think are actually going to be really good moves in terms of going, hey, you know what? This restart is going to be awesome. It is a funny thing how we do this. So let's see. WGS4. Good. It's not a recurring meeting. WGS4. Good. Okay. Good. And let's see if we can't get this bad boy going. And that looks like it should get us everything that we need right there. Good. And Zoom, we're believing that you're going to give us that magic moment, and it's all going to be awesome. So let's try this. And these guys have been so... there's a very funny little quote in here. There we go. All right. Let's see if that does it. Let's see if that doesn't do it. Okay. So, with that said, let's do this. And 37 people. Thank you so much for being patient. Now, let's see how calm I am after Zoom gives us this next message. Let's see what's happening here. Gentlemen, well, I know that I'm in the meeting here. And just to demonstrate that, let's see, let's get this guy going up here. All right, gentlemen. "41 people. Hello, if you're just joining us, I'm in the process of bringing the folks into the Zoom meeting. For whatever reason, Zoom was not being very nice and is still not being very nice. Okay, that means it's a restart. Let's see what Mason, you having the same thing? All righty then. Okay. Well, let's see here. I can't do two things that well at the same time, but you know what? Why doesn't somebody ask me you know what? I have a sinking suspicion. I know what's happening. I think Zoom is forcing me to do a restart. And let's try this. Yep. I am typing the guy saying that I'm actually updating the Zoom application because I actually have a feeling maybe that's what's happened. Is Zoom is just like, hey, I actually found Zoom to be very secure. In fact, it's so secure right now, it won't let my guests in, which is kind of ironic, but let's see here. All right, let's try this again here. There we go. All right, now let's do this. New meeting. Join with computer audio. Oh, they've changed the interface here. Starting the video. Thank you very much. Let's go over to here. And now we're going to go more invite. All right. And there we go. There's the link. And then there's the invitation. And let's see if that's let those guys in there. I'm not even sweating it, but I will apologize just the same. I hope, do me a favor, everybody. Let me know how your day is going. Hemet, but work in MV. Like Hemet, Terry, David, like Hemet up by Lake Hemet down in the Palm Springs area. There we go. Oh, look at you guys are chatting. Thanks so much. So it was late, but it's on YouTube now. Hey, Marcus. All right, let's see what's going on with these guys. See, I'm gonna have a little moment. Now I'm a little stumped. Give me a second, folks. Why Zoom would be doing this? And okay. We're trying an alternate approach here. Let's see how this goes. Brian Felix, you're blessed. I love it. How you doing, Brian? I hope you had a great day. All right. Excellent. Thanks for the patience for those of you that are coming into this new. Let's see. Come on, FaceTime. Pick it up on this machine. And come on. And we're going to try FaceTime here. So let's see if we can't get them to come in via FaceTime. Come on. All right. All right. Let's do this. Just 1 second. Why did I not get that? Ah, because Zoom's probably grabbed that. Okay. Good. FaceTime. Hit me again. 1 second here. Determined to make this work. Come on. Come on. All right. Aha. That's a very good sign. Mason is not picking up. Come on, bud. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Mason, how are you doing? Thank you so much for your patience. All right. I do not have your audio coming through yet, but you look fabulous. You look fabulous. Everybody, thank you so much. I promise you, once we get this dialed, the level of gear geekery is going to be so severe, it's going to be awesome. Mason, go ahead and give me some. All right, so let me see. Let me go into my audio preferences, and let me make sure I've got this dialed up. Settings. Boom, boom, boom. You guys are so patient. I really, 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 really appreciate. Okay, not seeing that there. Let's see. Mason, can you hear me? And good, good, good. I got a notification. I wonder, hey, can you bring St. Pope into your call there? I saw Mason though. Hang on a second. There we go. We're finding our workarounds now. So look, there the video's good. Good internal microphone. There we go. Video output, universal audio Thunderbolt. There's I'm on the right microphone. Thunderbolt. Good. This is just really kind of interesting. Preferences. And I just know this is going to work sooner than later. You know, I've got it. I wonder. Uh-oh. You guys are awesome. We will fix this. This is very... Oh my word. I think I'm almost to the point of using Skype. All right. Skype. I can't believe this. All right. Thank you. Make it worth your while. Okay, good. We're trying Skype. Pope is checking on Skype. Haven't heard from Mason yet, but my guess is that he has a Skype account. And let's do this. Come on. Oh. Mason would like to FaceTime. We're back on FaceTime. Oh. Mason? Hey, I've got your audio. Okay, now this time I've got audio.
Well, I'm using my iPad just because it seemed like, for whatever reason, it doesn't recognize on FaceTime for me the not Pro Tools, but the Thunderbolt.
All right, then. It used to be Thunderbolt was so cool. So now let me do a little bit of this, and let me see what kind of magic I can do. And
so is this how you're going to run the stream from this?
I'm going to run the stream from this. And
okay.
I'm actually going to go like this, and this is going to be great. And let's see, Can you see if you can get St. Pope on your end?
Yeah, we'll see. I wonder why on here it won't allow, like on the good camera, it won't allow me to run the audio. I'm not sure why.
That's, you know what? I'm just really glad to see you. First of all, everybody's been hanging out. Thank you so much. We're getting really, 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 really close. And I'm going to do this. I've gone PIP. We're going to go full screen with you guys. And once we get St. Pope on here, we will have found our workaround. And as I promised before, the level of gear geekery is going to be like nothing you've ever experienced. Mason, are you ready to talk about solderless cables?
Sure,
Are you ready to talk about switchers?
absolutely.
Are you ready to talk about dumbles?
Sure.
Are you ready to talk about tubes and the nuance of strings and all the crazy stuff that guitar players love to geek out about? Because we're just going to go, we're going to go away. Hang on. I'll see him come back. I'm going full screen for a sec. Okay, up. Then that's on the delay there. So I'm going to go PIP there just so when he comes back. Let's do this. And I'm going to go PIP there. Okay, that's Skype. We're going to quit out of Skype. I am absolutely 100% undeterred to make this work. And soon we will have all this grooviness up and running. And I'm just going to have that ready for him to do that. Wow, that's really way too much Doug. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me take a look, and there we go. All right, let me take a look at the stream down here, and I'm going to try and jump in and start answering some questions, if at all possible. Thank you, worship musician. Sound good. Bradford. Flying to Bradford. Is that my Bradford? Which Bradford is that? 41 comments. Here we go. Let's take a look at this. And come on. And there we go. And taking a look over on YouTube. Like I said, I am 100% undeterred. So we will get there. And I promise you, it's going to be fantabulous once we get all this crazy stuff dialed. Good. Checking in with our 14 that are over here watching on YouTube. I'm going to go full screen here. I'm going to keep an eye on that. First of all, Nathaniel, welcome. Wes, thanks for hanging out. Gilbert, appreciate you being here. Sahara, hello. Vertex Effects, hello from San Francisco. What a strange surprise that Vertex is here. Marcus, hey, praying it works. We're unrelenting. Thank you, though. We accept the prayer. Thank you so much. Kevin, hey, I'll wait as long as I need to see Mr. Vope. I love that. Ditto. I'm all in. So in any case, there we go. Hang on. Mason is back. Come on. Here we go. Oh, there we go. And Mason and St. Pope. So let's see if we can grab that call. Give me a sec here. Let's see what's happening with this little bad boy right there. That's interesting. What's crazy is my phone is wanting to see that call, but the computer isn't. So I'm going to turn my phone off for a minute and join FaceTime. That's really strange to FaceTime. You know what? This is just a spiritual thing. I'm just not buying it. I am just not buying it. I'm sorry. There we go. I'm dialing Mason. Undeterred. We're going to see St. Pope. Kevin, thank you. I'm with you 100%. Mason picked that thing up. There we go. For whatever reason, my computer did not want to pick that up. Can you add...
Yeah, I'll add Pope.
You know, the funny thing is that... Well, we were going to add Pope. Hang on, I'm just going to call him. You know what? I'm going to wait until he's got him. And then I'm just going to call him back now. There we go. Come on. We got this. Gonna happen. I'm telling you, I am unrelentless at this point. Like at this point, it's not even a matter of ego. It's just kind of like, you know what? This is just a full.
Well, do you want me to try to host it on my Zoom? I don't know if there's an easy way to import it to your side.
Can you get him over onto your?
Yeah, it seems like every time I do, though, it turns you off.
Okay, hang on. So why don't I try and do this? Let me pull this over to my other screen, and can you walk me through adding him to the call?
Yeah, so there should be there should be something in kind of the bottom left-hand corner that you can bring up, kind of like pull up. That ordinarily it just looks like maybe there's like a mute or something like that, and for me it's in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen.
And you're on a Mac, of course, because
I'm on a Mac. Yeah.
Okay, it's not giving me that.
Okay.
So I'm going to try.
Let's see.
I mean, the good news is we got audio. And I should see something also the equivalent of add call, correct?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at what it looks like on my computer comparatively. Because I'm doing this for my iPad now because I couldn't get the Apollo to come through, unfortunately.
This is by the time we actually get to this, it's going to be awesome. I am just like, this is just a spiritual attack. I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying it. What happens if what if we get Pope to call you?
Sure.
Hang on a second. Let me dial this dude. There we go. I'm not dying. I'm not. Hey, I can hear you. Can you do me a favor and see if you can dial Mason, and then you guys will be merged on FaceTime, and I'll bring you in on his feed. I've got him connected, and hopefully you can get into him. And if you can't get into him, try me. But try him first. Let's see how we do. And actually, no, don't add him to this call because this is just a voice call. If you can call him on FaceTime, I think we're going to be there. All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay, bye. All right, thanks. Undeterred. Thank you. Greetings from Nebraska. What's going on, Colin? How you doing? Doug, please show us your guitar wizardry. Zahara, you're funny. I don't mean funny like that. I mean very kind. I'm obviously not impressing you with my Zoom wizardry at this moment.
All right, I'm going to bring in Pope.
Okay, come on.
Let's see.
Come on.
You know, the thing that it's telling me to do, Doug, is it's telling me to end the call with you
and bring him
accept. In. Yeah, so it doesn't allow. It's for whatever reason we're not able to sort of do the multiple caller version. It's like I have to hang up with you to get him for some reason.
Okay. Okay. Question: Do you have an active Skype account?
I do.
Okay. Hang on. I wonder if what's going to happen with my audio if we all come in on Skype.
It's the same thing. I think you can just select the source.
Oh, wait. And an accept. So, okay, hang on. So, okay. Oh, this is. Look at that handsome guy. All right, hang on a second. Hey, I know you. All right, so. There we go. Thank you very much. So, we're going to try and figure out. Everybody, it's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce the one and the only Saint Pope. All right.
Lots of build up to this moment.
Lots of build up to this moment. So the hack we're about to try is we're going to see if I can bring in Mason on Skype. And I think what I'm going to do that is I'm going to use my built-in microphone for Skype, and hopefully everything will travel out to the Apollo.
All right, sounds good.
So let's see how we do. You know what? While I'm doing that, would you be so kind as to tell us a little bit about that lovely collection of guitars. And by the way, have you organized them
Sure, man.
alphabetically and height
They're
wise
they're
now?
they're correctly, yeah, they're correctly organized now. So no worries. That
I,
one guitar out of place on our last call was just too much for me.
no, that was bad. So I should actually do a proper introduction. First of all, though he doesn't really need an introduction, he certainly deserves one. One of the great things about the House of Worship that's a little bit different than kind of the mainstream guitar world is that you don't always have to be in a band with somebody for 10 years to kind of get to know them. The worship
Yeah.
guys are so cool. The neat thing is that, and I'm not dissing the mainstream guys, but it's just a different dynamic. Worship
Yeah.
guitar players love to fellowship. So with that said, I kind of met Michael, and I think like many of you, I love his guitar playing. I think, first of all, he's had a huge impact on the House of Worship. He's got, here we go, great tone, great intonation, a great sense of dynamics, a great sense of arrangement. People rave about his music directing. He is a musician's musician. He's got an amazing work ethic, and he's just a great guy and brings the whole picture. So I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for weathering through this. So where we're picking up is on the guitar geekery. It's part of the gear geekery. So would you be so kind as to host here and roll with it?
Yeah. Well, thank you. First of all, you're too kind, but sure, man. So everybody, just a couple guitars here. I've kind of reduced the rig. It's a little mini quarantine rig. So we'll just go down the line. First up, this has kind of been the main ride lately. Sorry for the glare. You can see a little bit of console in the background there. But this is just a Fender American Original Telecaster that I just smashed on my head.
Distressed.
Yeah, just distressed. And I mean, that's how I like them. And with some of these more classic guitars, if they're not a little beat up, I feel a little weird hanging on to them. But yeah, this thing's completely stock as it is. You could, call up Sweetwater or find one in the store and buy one exactly like this. And it's been great. The neck's nice and thick. And the stock pickups in this actually sound really, really, really great. It totally does the microphonic pickup thing, which is kind of what I'm after with a, vintage style guitar. So thing's a workhorse for me, man. Love that guitar.
That's a magic.
Next up,
the Strat. Here we go.
Yeah. So this is a 1976 Fender Stratocaster. I bought this off a friend of mine in Reading. He was kind of getting out of the guitar player thing and starting to roast coffee and do some more, start some more culinary endeavors. And a lot of people, diss on these old 3-bolt guitars, and they sure aren't the easiest to travel with. But man, you keep them in a studio, and they sure sound great. This one's actually pretty light, which is maybe, at least in terms of the 70s Fender stuff I've played, I think weight has usually been the issue I've had with it. But this thing is great. Also, I mean, completely stock minus the tuners, which are just some, modern reproduction. Same as what would have come on here in the 70s, and the original ones just live in the case. And then my good friend and guitar tech, David Paleo, who's out in Reading, I miss him dearly, made a bone nut for this guitar as the original, plastic or nylon one kind of wore out. But yeah, this thing's kind of another workhorse guitar for me. I love it to death. I wasn't super into Strats until I got this guitar, and just it's hard not to pick this one up first most days. And I also keep this one down a half step for whatever reason. I don't know. It just sounds good tuned that way. So yeah, there's the Strat. Getting into some Veritas stuff. I call this guitar the Junior Special. It kind of looks like a cross between a Les Paul Junior and a Les Paul Special to me. But this guitar is smoking. The single wraparound bridge just makes it a rock and roll machine, man. Like the tension on the strings is just perfect. And I also really love, these are Casey's pickups. These are, I think he calls them the Polecat. But they just sound like really open and kind of jangly, but still have that P90 bite. Some modern P90s for me get a little too quacky and mid-humpy, and these kind of stayed nice and open, which is preferred for me. And then, like a lot of other guitar players, and if you watching, hopefully you guys are keen to this, but Tom Bukovac's been doing a bunch of YouTube videos during quarantine, and so thanks to him, this guitar lives in open G now, and that's been a really, really fun tuning to get into. I mean, I've played in it a little bit before, learning some old Rolling Stones songs and, doing the old Keith Richards thing, 5 strings and the truth. But good old Uncle Tom, man, he sealed the deal. So this thing's kind of been living in open G lately. And again, I'm just loving this thing. And there's the headstock for people who are interested in that. So that's a fun guitar. Normally I'd have my my Veritas Gold Top here, but that's with Casey at the moment doing a little rethin. That'll when I get that back, I can share that with the world. So in its place right now is just my trusty old sparkly Duo Jet. It looks like Christmas. I took this by Glazers, and they were like, "Man, we need this guitar for our Christmas photo shoot." And I was like, "This is the one to have." So. I forget which model Duo Jet it is, but the important things to know is it's got the Dynasonic pickups in it. It's chambered as they all are, and it comes in red sparkle. So, high points. And this is a really cool guitar. As far as like the newer Gretsch stuff, I've mostly been a fan of the Dynasonic thing over the Filtertrons, at least with their newer guitars. Filtertrons sound great. I just been preferring these, and it stays in standard tuning. Next has kind of been, this has been the most awesome guitar I've got lately. This is a 67 Gretsch 6120. When I moved to town, I figured I needed a guitar that said Nashville on it. So it's got the word Nashville there and Chet Atkins' name. We moved, and I think anytime you move, you kind of realize how much junk you've accumulated. And we got to town, and I was like, man, I have a couple guitars and a bunch of pedals that I just don't really use or play anymore. And so, I kind of Marie Kondoed my rig and traded a bunch of stuff in and went down to Carter's and picked this thing up. And, man, this thing has just been ruling me lately. Like these old Filtertrons are special. They're man, they have a sound completely, all of their own. And the guitar too, so the F-holes you see here, these are just painted on. And so this guitar just has a really big boxy sound. The Bigsby on this thing is like perfectly broken in, just has that perfect wiggle, comes back in tune. And it's in like really good shape too. Like the binding's all there. It's not cracked or flaking off, which is something you find on a lot of these old Gretsch guitars. So it's in good shape and, completely stock as well. The only change I did to it is I had Glazer put some frets on it. And, I mean, that just brought this thing to life. So, the last 4 or 5 months for me have just been playing the hell out of it and, breaking the frets in a little more. So that's definitely a go-to for me lately. And then a favorite ever since I've had it and kind of I guess second to last guitar. There's one over here in the corner I almost forgot about. It's a good old Veritas 503. This one I've changed up a little bit from the standard 503. I've kind of put the Chet bar on it, the little squiggly guy. So now it's got this cool looking stick shift on it. And then I did 4 knobs, kind of like a 335 or something would have, just for a little more control over each pickup. But pretty standard hollow body guitar, just 3-way switch. Got signature Veritas pickups in it, which are kind of between like a PAF and modern low output style pickup. It's kind of a different sound. It's still pretty low output, but a little bit warmer than like a El Rayo or his Bearcat or something like that. So these are pretty interesting sounding, and I'm definitely into them. Casey crushed it with these pickups, and so yeah, double bound. It's a little thicker than a 335 style guitar, so it has a little bit of a sound of its own. And then the last thing I have around here doesn't get to fit in the boat, but yeah, just Jerry Jones baritone. So that would be the guitars.
Michael,
Yeah.
the Zoom meeting has rendered access to
Ooh.
Mason, and I'm in there too. Would you care
All
to
right,
join
you
us
want me to
over here?
join?
Let's see if we can actually make this. Kind of inexplicable, but it's working.
All right.
So, hey, there we go.
All right.
I'll see you in a sec. Thank you for the guitar tour. All right.
Yep, sounds good.
Amen.
Doug, can you hear me? I just want to make sure that
There we go. A little hotter would be great.
a little hotter, okay?
There we go. That sounds great. One more time. Give me an audio test.
How's that?
Bring it back just a spot.
How's that?
That's great. Mason,
Okay.
it's working.
It's working.
Oh, that is so absolutely bizarre. Okay, well, I get a chance to introduce you. Mason,
All right.
I think, we've known each other the better part of a decade at this point.
Absolutely.
We've worked trade shows together. We did the thing at Guitar Showcase together. I don't even remember exactly what that was, but it was like a micro-regional pedal hang. First of all, you got, what is it, a 76 Strat, or is it or is it 68? St. Pope, there he is.
And
Hold on,
but we have done it.
the Zoom, especially on a worship guitar show, it would be inappropriate to say the Zoom gods have opened the door. So we're just going to say the big God has opened the door for all of this. Now, let's see if I mute my video here. Let me see if I can do something. No, I'm going to do it from up here. Hang on a second, guys. Stop video. I wonder. No. Seriously? Oh. Give me a
If
moment,
you
guys.
did the video thing again, you should be good.
Yeah, no, what I actually want to do is I actually want to get you guys side by side. And it's actually oh, there we go. Hide self view. That should be it. There we go. Now we're getting there. Give me just 1 second. And in theory, now we've got finally. Thank you for everybody being so patient. So here's the deal. Is at specific points, I'm going to kind of make it switch back so I'm not like hogging half the screen. But in case Michael and Mason, I'm basically the left-hand side, and then you guys are sharing the right-hand side. But this allows it to make it so it's not so small. Again, for everybody that's out there watching, I apologize for the technical stuff. Zoom has, it was the same meeting. It wasn't letting us in, and now it is. So, Mason, I was introducing you. So you're handsome. You know a crap ton about Strymon bridges. By the way, so like I said, we're going to get into a level of geekery that is so much fun. The term Strymon bridge. So I was on in my other life, I do these mainstream guitar hangs. So I was on a call with Joe Satriani, and I talked about a genderless minor chord. That is to say, if we're going to geek down on modes for a second, you can play a minor chord at the 2, 3, and the 6. But if you just have a minor chord that's kind of, you haven't declared where there is the 2, 3, or 6, it's kind of open-ended. It can be a Dorian, can be a Phrygian, can be a minor, until there's other things that happen in maybe the bass note movement or a vocal movement, or St. Pope hits something up at the top of the neck and swells in. Whatever that is, it's a quote-unquote genderless minor chord. So the Strymon bridge, though, is actually even more effective. So I've got to start there, Mason. It's pretty obvious what it is, but for some who have not experienced the Strymon bridge, can you define it? And two, tell us where you came up with that name.
Well, I didn't actually come up with the name. The person that came up with the name Strymon Bridge was actually Rhett Shull. And we were doing a video together where he flew out from Atlanta, and he had asked me if there was a way to sort of be able to use a programmable switcher, like the one that a lot of us use, like RJM or Musicom Lab or Boss ES8. And essentially he wanted to have a bridge that would rise them all up on the same sort of level or tier so that he could route the switcher cabling underneath it. And he coined it in the video as the Strymon Bridge, and it's now lived in perpetuity as that name. And even the metal manufacturer who made it for us, who makes our enclosures for all of our pedals, started selling them on Reverb, calling them Strymon Bridges. So it was certainly a name that stuck, and it's just sort of the Strymon trifecta. And it, I don't know. I'm trying to see if I can just bring up an easy picture here.
Oh, that'd be great.
Let's see if I can do it.
Michael, do you know Brett Scholl?
I know of him. I've seen his YouTube videos, but we've never met.
I met him at NAMM briefly, and I think, yes, if you do any search for guitar, you're going to be inundated with Brett Scholl coming up on the right-hand side. Which
oh, yeah.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
So this is the board, and you can see here.
I'm going to, hang on, give me a second here. Let me give you full screen privileges, and let's see if we can do something a little bit. I'm now discovering one of my little, hang on a second here. All right. All right, so I'm not going to be able to get you full screen on this thing.
That's okay. That's okay. Hopefully you can just go and watch the video, and it's on Rhett's channel, and he sort of coined this term, the Strymon Bridge, because you can see all the cabling of the front row is sort of routing underneath this bridge, which is made out of just a folded aluminum. And we've had various renditions of this over time, and now they have hinges and all sorts of fancy stuff now that they didn't have then, but it's sort of evolved over time and sort of started with Rhett. And so and I just want to make sure that it's correct here. Doug, you don't want us to see you, right? Because I don't see you.
Unfortunately, you're not seeing me. So
okay.
what I'll
just make sure that was deliberate.
That was deliberate. So the other thing that you guys can do if you dare is open up a second browser window and just kind of and make sure the volume feed off of that is down. But it's not required. And if you guys have the overwhelming desire to see me, which I don't think you will, and at some point I'm going to get tired of seeing myself half frame, but but in any case, I want that gets me into my first question. And Michael, I should know this because I've spent a little bit of time studying your board. And Mason, I would love to get both of you guys' input on this. Volume pedal before drives or after drives? I'm an after the drive pedals because I don't want to starve them. But some people enjoy kind of the vibe of kind of cleaning up a little bit as opposed to just doing a Vertex boost. Mason, maybe that already says where you're going to weigh in on this, but let's start with Michael. Where do you prefer to?
I mean, I'm an after guy. I've always thought why if the volume pedals in front of the drives, it's essentially the same thing as your guitar volume. So why have two things that do the same thing? And especially, I mean, the whole ambient swell thing is as annoyed as we can all get by it. It's just a big part of the church music sound. And so, just for my own personal preference, I think, the taper of a volume pedal, whether you're using a Vertex boost or not, is just cleaner when placed after the drive. Things just sound a little more consistent and you get a better sounding swell out of it. So yeah, that's kind of where I live.
Mason, I think I already know the answer here, but I'm willing to. I'd love to hear your take on it and kind of your strategy.
Yeah, well, I think it's really. I don't know if it's so much a right or wrong thing as a matter of taste, but I almost would have said the exact same thing that Pope did, where there's a redundancy in putting the volume pedal first. Because your volume pod on your guitar will do that. Now, some people are less adept and less comfortable at manipulating that as they're playing, and so they prefer the volume pedal because it doesn't disrupt their right hand if they're having to go for, lowering the input into the entire board, something like that. But I think all things being equal, putting it after the drives is the best way to do it, and it's essentially acting as a master volume. Or if you have an amplifier with an effects loop, you can also potentially put that volume pedal right after the send of the effects loop. The only challenge there is that some volume pedals can't handle the level of the effects loop, and so you just have to make sure you match the impedance of the volume pedal properly to the effects loop if you're going to do that.
That's an interesting thing. So one of the things that I'm most looking forward to tonight is we're going to geek out across the decades of stuff. Now, I am the oldest guy in the room, so like I my decades go a little bit further back.
Prove it.
But I'm 55, dude. I got the driver's license here. I am. Now the worst part is when they start sending you like burial plot reservation things in the mail, dude. You're old then. So the whole thing is that the strategy of putting together these different types of rigs. You talked about the volume pedal and the effects loop thing. So we're going to go way back where I toured with Michael Schenker for a while, and his whole thing was he would put the delay in the loop, but he would use the volume pedal with the delay in the loop. So that's like, that's the old school. When you've got a Marshall with a loop and you want to control your delay, that was that little trick. So Mason, kind of, why don't you kind of run with that for a second and just kind of walk through your experience of people you've seen doing that and kind of that whole strategy?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with what an effects loop is, it's essentially an insert between the preamp out and the power amp in. And typically these are coming out of the send at line level, although there's no standard, to my knowledge, in the guitar world about what that impedance is that's coming out, and what the level is. So they can really be all over the place. But some people prefer, if they have an effects loop, to use the volume pedal there because it's really shutting off the entire preamp section completely. So really acting as a better master volume. The challenge, though, that a lot of people have, as I kind of alluded to before, is that because there is no standard on the level that's coming out of the send of an effects loop, some of the volume pedals just won't work, and so you'll put it in the heel down position and it won't be off all the way. And so this can be a challenge, and so some people, as a result of that, end up putting it in the front, which is also, I think, totally acceptable. But if it's workable in your situation and you have an effects loop and you want to use it as a master volume, you can do that. Now, a workaround to that a lot of people have done is we have this product called the Vertex Boost, and it has an actual insert in the boost so that you can put in an expression pedal or a volume pedal and it will act accordingly. And it'll also allow you to boost and control the boost with it. The cool thing about it is that it nullifies any of the impedance needs of a volume pedal. So it sort of is just creating sort of this firewall for the volume pedal. So no matter what volume you put in there, no matter what impedance it is, the effects loop is irrelevant as far as whatever level it's putting out. And our boost will go plus or minus 9. So it'll handle any effects loop that's out there. So that's another workaround that some people use if they're not happy with the results that they're getting, or they're not able to find a volume pedal that will mate well with their effects loop.
I love it. I got an idea for a volume pedal mod for you. Just in the same way you can put a high pass filter into your volume control.
Sure.
It would be really nice to be able to have one that you could switch or use some sort of dial such that when you backed off on your volume pedal, it actually acted as a high pass filter. I've never seen that.
Yeah, Dumble used to do them in those Showbud volume pedals. Those pedal steel ones, the really huge ones that Larry Carlton used. Yeah, Larry Carlton's had a treble bleed built into the volume pedal.
And I thought I was so original. Michael, so I understand you don't have a board constructed right now, so you're just kind of throwing stuff together.
I don't, man.
I actually think that's really cool.
Just, hodgepodging it.
So as you do that, do you think about individual pedals and you like, I want this particular drive and maybe this particular fuzz, or do you think about the synergy between them or a combination of that?
I mean, it's all completely dependent upon the part. Pedals are all just different colors for me. And so for this, scaled back quarantine rig, I've just, pulled a few things out of my, box of too many pedals that just stuff that I, either use pretty consistently or, maybe something that's got a a more unique voice for, you know, a certain project or something like that. And honestly, since, you know, having this little rig up for the last little month or two, it's been pretty rare for me to have more than one pedal between the guitar and amp. You know, maybe two at the most, like so like, you know, like a fuzz and then an EQ after it or something. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's been guitar into one pedal, depending on, you know, what I'm doing, into either my Benson Chimera or this Bad Cat I've got over here. And then if I need anything beyond that, it's coming from a plugin.
You're going to open the door for that. So you've been spending a bunch of time with aux.
Yeah, yeah, a necessary evil that isn't as evil as I maybe initially thought.
All right, so I'm gonna keep going on that one. So, you know, first of all, if anybody's not familiar with the aux, what it basically is a reactive load box that enables you to take a tube amplifier and run it optionally without a speaker cabinet. You can run it with a speaker cabinet, but basically it acts like a virtual speaker cabinet, and then you can take the output of that and run it into a range of places. But one of the cool things about the aux is it's made by Universal Audio, so it's got their amazing plugins in it. So, Mason, you were mentioning that you have a UA interface there as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a Apollo that this is running through right now, and I also have an aux.
Okay, so I've got an aux not in this room. So Michael, how did you kind of start using the aux? Was it recommended by a friend, or were you just kind of like, you know what, I have the need, I'm gonna pick one up?
With stuff like this, I've kind of always done my own research. Not that I don't trust everybody, but I've always just been like a gut feeling guy. If I don't have that gut feeling, then I don't buy anything. So yeah, I mean, this whole COVID thing hit. It just so happened to hit right as the lease for our studio space was up. And so, unfortunately, we had to pack up our studio and move out of it. And so we ended up splitting the gear between Dan's house and my house. But to make it even more interesting, I'm not even living in a house right now. This is a little Airbnb apartment that my wife and I are renting because we're renovating a house down the street. And so, you know, for me, I've always been like, you know, I've always felt like I live kind of somewhere between like the, you know, new group of guitar players coming up and like the older guys. Like, you know, I love new technology and that kind of stuff, but I'm still very rooted in like classic, you know, just give me a tube amp and stick a guitar into it and let me go. And so, yeah, I've just always been a fan of a microphone on a speaker into a preamp, into an interface into Pro Tools. And that's just not something I'm able to do here. And because, you know, I do this for a living, or somewhat of a living some days, I needed a solution, you know, to get my guitar into the computer, and I needed it to sound as close to that microphone on a speaker as possible. And so I did my research. We've used a lot of UA products at the studio, so I kind of trusted the brand. You know, all their interfaces and plugins have just been amazing. And just looking, you know, for something simple that made sense. You know, I didn't need a bunch of extra features or effects really built into it. I just wanted something, you know, really solid that would emulate a speaker, and then also something that I could potentially, you know, resell when this is over. Because when I have a studio space built, I didn't know if I was going to keep this or not. So, you know, for all, you know, sides of it, for me, the aux felt like the best choice. And it's actually been really, really cool to kind of dive in and figure out what it's great at, what it's not so great at. You know, I do like it. A lot of people are like, oh man, you're going to love it. I don't love it. I like it. And there's a few setbacks to it, but those things can kind of be overcome with some, you know, very standard studio technique. And yeah, so I'm happy with it. And honestly, it's kind of opened up the plugin world for me. Because, you know, doing a session at my studio, or even, you know, especially going to another studio and doing a session, it's just load in my 2 amps, set them mostly clean, and let pedals, you know, do everything. So the ability to dive into, plugins and kind of have that world of post effects opened up is a completely different sound than running pedals into the front end of an amp. And so now as I'm like planning this studio build, kind of this like guitar palace in my garage at this next house, I'm kind of like, okay, like it's kind of got me rethinking a little bit of that. How can I, still have my amp set up in a way that I can, run all the pedals into the front end like I've been doing, but now how can I get into post or, some of the stuff that Mason's been talking about lately, like the true wet, dry or wet, dry, wet kind of stuff. Like it's all different colors, it's all different sounds, and it's all viable depending on what you're working on. So if anything, like that's what I'm, most stoked about with the aux is that it's kind of opened up this world that I probably wouldn't have gotten into otherwise, just for sake of keeping things simple.
So
it's been great.
No, that's awesome. So first of all, hello, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. Eric, what's going on, man? So microphones. Let's talk mics for a minute, because the interesting thing is a lot of worship guitar players.
Sure.
They're used to the SM57, but for the most part, it's a direct kind of world. So first of all, I love microphones, because they're like a pickup, really. They like, everyone's got its own flavor. And as I recall, you guys were using the SM56. So let's geek out on mics for a second. Michael, sure, I will hand it over to Mason. But starting with Michael.
Yeah, so actually the mic that we would use is we would use the newer version of it for anything live, the Shure 545 SD, I think, but it's based on the old Unidyne 545, which it looks exactly like a 57, unless you found like a weird pistol grip model. I don't have one sitting here, otherwise
I do. Let me grab one.
They're in the other room.
Let me grab one.
Sure, but basically the great thing about the 545 is it's basically the same EQ curve or response as a 57. It just has an extended top end range, and so where an SM57 gives you that like sizzle, to me it kind of sounds like you're searing a steak or something. Like it's just got that zing and that sizzle on the top end. The 545 stays more open, and so you can still get really bright guitar tones if that's what you're going for, but it's a more smooth top end, which has always been more pleasant to my ears. I'm getting really used to the 545s. Anytime I go back to a 57, most of the time I'm like, oh, it sounds a little harsh or a little buzzy to me, and I have to take a minute and readjust. But that's the mic that was on, gosh, pretty much everything I did at Bethel Music, minus I think For the Sake of the World might have been 57s, but even so, like Chris Greeley, who was our engineer for years, that was just kind of his microphone of choice, and he was the one who turned me on to it. And for the longest time I didn't even experiment with other microphones. It was just throw one of those on each guitar amp and away we go.
What I missed, probably something awesome.
He gave the
just talking about the 545 basically being a 57 in sound. Yep, that's the one. It's it looks like a silver 57, and the sound is really similar as well. Whereas the 57 kind of has that sizzle on the top end. The 545 has a more open top end range to its EQ curve, so you don't get that sizzle. It's a much more open and a more smooth sounding top end, which is just something I prefer over the sizzle of a classic 57.
You don't like that spike in the ear, just kind of?
I don't mind it. Again, it's all different colors, and I could never dog on the 57. It's I would say it's the most popular microphone maybe ever, especially for guitar. But if I've got my own pick, then that the 545 is kind of what I go for close, because it is very close to a 57. It doesn't have that sizzle. That's kind of the best way I can describe it.
Before I jump over to Mason, no, that's great. I actually love a 57, and the great thing about a 57 is that if you bring it off you got a speaker, you got your dust cap,
yep,
you got a flashlight, You shine it at the edge of the dust cap. If it's a little too bright, you move it further away from the center of the speaker. But most of the time, right at the edge of the dust cap is kind of the sweet spot. And the neat thing about the 57, if you put it in the center of the speaker, it's not a
Yeah.
very pleasant sound. But right at the edge of the dust cap,
Oh
that
no.
top end kind of brings out the clarity, but you still get the body.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the other thing that I forgot to mention too is like placement for the microphone. I would basically use one finger and find the very center of the speaker. Use my other finger and find the edge, and that middle point between the two is where I'd always stick the mic. Just right up on the grill cloth. Almost touching. But that's always been kind of a good in between spot to. I mean, start for any microphone really, and then if you want more sound, you move it closer to the center. If you want a thinner tone, move it further away. But yeah, that middle point was always kind of where we had things.
Note to self. I love it. Mason?
All right. Well, I got a couple of mic things to lay on you. First of all, sleeper mic. This is a sleeper mic that people aren't talking about, but I was introduced to this by famous television scoring extraordinaire Snuffy Walden. He did like Wonder Years and West Wing. Was the Blue Mike's Encore 100i. It's like $100 mic that is, if you had to take one mic and you couldn't do the classic combo of a 57 and a Royer, it is incredibly close to those two blended mics at $100 price point. We've been using those a lot in our studio in Burbank for a lot of the recordings, and for a single mic, it's fantastic. Certainly you have a Royer and a 57, use them. But if you need to if you're on a budget, you're trying to get into it, you can't yet afford the Royer, then this is definitely a good entry level one. But the other one that I like a lot, and I'm not speaking so much as Pope is about having recorded just a catalog of music that is sort of going to remain the gold standard, I think, in tones for worship guitar for decades. We're recording a lot of demo videos, and so for us the real challenge is trying to put somebody in the room, who would be hearing these products. Yeah. Our technique is sort of the opposite of what you would do for a record, where you're trying to carve out this really specific area for your instrument. We're trying to sort of like add in room and create a lot of the room atmosphere as though somebody were sitting in front of it, because most people don't listen to guitar pedals with their ear on the speaker,
Yeah.
And so we kind of have this,
and that's a huge adjustment that few people consider when they're jumping into the pedal demo thing. Like so many people, ask even me all the time, like, oh man, like how do I get a good sound through my monitors? And most of the time the answer is you just need to sit in front of it and get used to it, because your ears are picking up the whole room, and that microphone is picking up about this much of that 12-inch speaker or whatever you're using. And so that's a really good point, Mason.
Yeah, so it's sort of the opposite. So for that, a lot of we use a lot of 414 room mics. We use the SM7, especially if we're going to be playing stuff that's really loud, like Marshalls and stuff like that, because the SPL handling of that is really great. And but there can be times, like we were doing this thing for a while that we called Game of Tones, where we were trying to replicate like studio recordings as closely as possible, and then playing them blind to like an audience of experts to see if they could tell the difference. And there was times where a close mic 57 right on the dust cap could be great if you're trying to do like Slash's tone on Paradise City, where it's like it's just all 2K, and a vintage 30 with SM57, it's just a 2K bubble bath, for the tone. It's just completely immersed in it. But if you heard the pedal demo like that, you would just be like, I don't want to buy this thing. But in the mix, it was incredible, So those are my miking stories, the sparse miking stories that I have.
I love that. So, Mason, you've relocated to Los Angeles from the Bay Area. Is that correct?
As far as the business location, yes. Where I live, though, I kind of split my time between the two places, except for now that we're sort of in this unusual time, I'm only in the Bay Area in Oakland.
Okay, and Michael, you've semi recently moved to Nashville. What is it
Yeah.
like, kind of being you've had a pretty big presence in the praise and worship world, a huge presence.
Yeah.
So, as if you had been a mainstream guitar player, you would have showed up at the jams, you would have showed up with your guitar, you would have been the badass and all that. What is it like from your perspective? How did you approach kind of moving into town, letting people know you were available for work? If you don't mind revealing kind of what
Yeah.
that process looked like.
No, sure, man. I think in some ways I'm still in that process. Uh, Kind of the first year of being here. We've been here about a year and a half now. Um, Sorry, somebody's blowing on. We've been here about a year and a half, and really the first year for me was just kind of taking a little bit of a step back and just taking a break. Being married for a little while, and it's funny. I mean, even, like I said for years, I would never wind up in Nashville, and like the move here had nothing to do with music. It was everything about this is where my wife was born and raised. This is where her entire family is. My family is a day's drive away in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so I mean, the past year and a half is kind of been refocusing on family and what that means. And I just wasn't able to really do that living, on the other side of the country and touring a lot. And so it's kind of funny. Like as of this year, I feel like is when I was finally like, all right, I've kind of chilled out for a year and you know ready to hit things hard in 2020. And then 2020 is just an absolute wreck of a year for everyone. So I mean, in some ways, I feel like I'm just starting to rev things up and get going. But it's for me, it's really just been calling around to people that I know and saying, hey, I'm not touring as much anymore. I'm available to record and write music, and it's just been getting in touch with friends and connections that I have in the music industry, and meeting up with friends, and it's been really great, man. Work has slowly started to pick up as things normalize and that kind of thing, and yeah, man, it's a good thing.
Hang on, I'm unpinning your video here. I can figure out how to make this. Come on, Doppler. There we go. All right, and go back to gallery view. So Mason, one of the things that kind of I admire about you is you have a stable of guitar players that you turn to. Like I was watching something that Mark Lettieri did at 25th Street, and I mean, do you ever feel guilty, like, or is it just the players love the gear and the opportunity to kind of, have the opportunity to play through great gear and great studios like 25th Street, but you're like, oh, Mateos, hey, can you come down and play? Hey, Mark, can you come down and play? What's that like for you? Or is it, can you unpack that?
Yeah, I'm just. I guess I'm trying to think. So the question is about how did that come to be, or I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
I'm famous for asking the 5-part question. So let's break that down into pieces.
That's okay.
Okay, you have amazing relationships with, again, Michael, so many really esteemed guitar players. Was there a starting place where you kind of went, this is what it is? Okay, let me break down a piece of this, and I'm going to add a little more preface in spite of all of that. We live in a business where there's quite often somebody trying to cozy up next to you for whatever it is that they can kind of cozy up next to you to get, at least on the mainstream side. So a number of these artists, especially mainstream artists, are used to that, like, oh, who's coming around? So, especially with those guys that have had careers, that there's always somebody who's trying to figure out how they can kind of put their photo up on the website associated with a piece of gear that they may never have actually even played with it, just got sent in the mail, and all of a sudden they're up on the roster. How have you approached getting to know people? Because I mean, your Rolodex is just kind of absurd in an amazing way.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was out with was without its sort of its challenges. You know, the putting somebody maybe promoting them prematurely. I think it's probably it would be disingenuous for me to say that I didn't get to learn some of this stuff the hard way. And I think that some of those mistakes are sort of part of the evolution of maybe failing your way to success. But I think that they were luckily in most of those circumstances it was something that was fairly benign as far as its impact. And so I think that the real thing is, I mean, it sounds sort of corny, but I think authenticity is important, and sometimes it's hard to it's hard to fake it if your intent with those people is really about, um, you know, because most of these artists presumably don't really need anything from us to create their sound or
Mm.
to do what they do, or to create their art. And these things that we make are sort of enhancements. We're sort of the final finishing salt on the steak. But they've kind of put in all the work. And so I think just coming at it, or I've always come at it with the intent of, like, you know I'm not here to try to get them to kind of derail whatever their pedal boards are, or the items on their pedal boards, and just sort of treat it like you walk into a store and you try on a shirt. If it works, then you wear it, and if it doesn't, then you just put it back on the shelf. And I think also just genuinely not taking anything personally if somebody doesn't like something, and really just be there about service. And that's kind of always been my approach, is that we want to serve their music as best we can, and if we have a product that's a fit and in alignment with what they're doing, that's great. And if it doesn't, then don't burn the bridge. It's like, okay, maybe the next product will work for them. And so we just kind of continue to stay in touch, and for whatever reason, either they liked my personality, or they found our interactions to be something that they liked and were favorable. And when they come into town, we'll hang out and talk, and sometimes that ends up aligning with the day off. And I'll ask them if they'd be interested in shooting some video with us, and shoot good video. A lot of people are interested in kind of promoting their work and things like that. And so this is kind of a good avenue that has kind of a quid pro quo.
That's awesome. So the other interesting thing is, do you have people that kind of come out of the woodwork like, dude, let me be in your demo? Like, I'm the best guitar player you've never seen.
Sometimes that happens. On occasion, it's somebody who actually is really good. And I think I try to look at them with somewhat of of the same lens that I would presume that some of the artists looked at me. And so I tried to look at their example videos, and sometimes it's they need to spend some more time working on their particular art. And sometimes they're really great, and there's people that we found that we never expected to find, and or the people that reached out that we would have never found ordinarily, and they were really fantastic, and it was a great fit. So I try to look at everybody seriously, but sometimes just like anything, that maybe 5%, is great, or less, and so I try to give everybody a fair shake no matter what, and really honestly look at what it is that they're doing and see if it's a fit for our brand. Or sometimes they're a great player, and they're just in sort of a genre that's not really we don't really have any pedals that address that, or that really do the thing that they're doing really well. And so I usually try to kind of just bookmark that and tell them, like, hey, I don't think we have anything that's a fit right now, but maybe in the future when we have something that's more in the genre, I'd love to circle back with you.
That's awesome. Part of my job here is to listen and find files simultaneously. So if it looks like I'm listening and trying to find files simultaneously, that's what I'm doing. And it never really comes across particularly great, even though I've kind of got my window small here. let's go back into studio world for a second, because I think, especially with the fact that so many people are at home right now, even if they haven't spent a lot of time in the studio world, I want to dive into this wet, dry, wet thing and talk a little bit about. And we were geeking out, and I'm gonna share my favorite thing, and let's see if Jam, you're awesome. Let's see if there are any Helix users in chat there, because one of my favorite little tweaks, and this is where it's going to get a lot of fun, is this kind of wet, dry, dry, wet, and we talked about this when we hung out the other day. Is the idea of using a pair of stereo amplifiers, and I'm Petrucci guitar is there. It is, so I play a range of different types of things. And tomorrow night I jump over into my other world and am interviewing John Petrucci and a bunch of the people that he works with. And so the idea is, if you're doing heavy guitars, you're kind of always double tracking, right? I mean, it's just kind of like, it's just like that's part of the sound, because that's, again, so you get it out of center channel. So strategically, I'm just going to kind of wrap for a quick second. The advantage of getting stereo guitars is that the vocal is almost always right smack in the center. You don't want to be on top of that. And so by moving your amplifiers usually to the far left and far right, that's the instinctual place to do it. And if you're using stereo delays and reverbs, they're going to sit in the same place. So I just happened to, in the years of kind of sometimes doing 4 guitar tracks, you start bringing them in a little bit closer to the center. And in so doing, one day I was just kind of messing around in Pro Tools, and I thought, well, what if I bring the guitars in and then use a stereo bus on the delays and the reverbs? And so for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it's basically the ability to have your guitar take a feed off of that, run that into a delay and or reverb that is set 100% wet, and you traditionally will pan that hard left and hard right in the studio. And it creates this lovely spatial stereo dealio. And for those of us that are old enough to be the oldest guy in the call, what started happening is, in many ways, the Strymons that we use and love are basically the small versions of the giant refrigerator racks that players that we're going to talk about probably in a moment, like the Dan Huffs and the Steve Lukethers and all those great studio musicians, started running these great studio quality effects in these giant racks. And we're kind of doing it now at a pedal board level, which is one of the reasons they're as expensive as they are. That is to say, taking that direct signal, not bringing it far left and far right, but either using 2 different amp models or 2 different IRs or 2 different cabinet models, and then bringing your effects left and right around that is one of the ways to get there. Michael, it's so much of your sound is recorded, has always struck me as this amazing live sound. I'd be very curious as to your approach, especially now as you're working with aux, but historically, how do you approach placing guitars and effects in the studio?
For the most part, I've mostly been focused on just like getting a tone that feels inspired to me and something that an engineer's happy with, and then, I'll kind of let the engineer do the work. Like if I can get our engineer on any project to be stoked with it, then I'll kind of leave that up to them to decide. But it's kind of funny, like the stereo thing for me actually started as a way to blend 2 different amp tones. Like it wasn't even about getting effects, far left and right. I think I might have, in the early days, just might have been young in my experience, and not thought about things that way. But it was just about kind of blending like a Fender amp tone and a Vox amp tone, because the Fender's got that nice full low end and that glistening top end, and then the Vox kind of punches through at that mid range. And then looking at the pedals, it was always just like, all right, well, there's a left output and a right output, so I should send that to, one amp and then that to the other. And then once I started playing on in-ear monitors a lot, that was like, oh, okay, this is great. There's so much more room to play. So, for me, it was just about, getting a blend of those tones, and then, just having kind of a little more headroom for those effects to kind of glue and fill out a mix. That's for most of the stuff, for most church music, people don't producers, artists, whatever, they don't want traditional guitar tone most of the time. Like you might have, a hook or something, that might sound kind of traditional, but solo it up, you know, outside of the rest of the band, and it's going to be drenched in effects, or it's going to have a pog on it, or it's going to have something on it that makes it pretty different from just a guitar into an amp kind of derivative tone, or a guitar overdrive pedal into an amp kind of tone. So the stereo thing for me has just always kind of been about glue and that kind of genre. If I'm doing an Americana record, or something more rock and roll based, then most of the time I'm not doing stereo tracks. Most of the time I'm just doing a mono track that's maybe one or two microphones blended, or even now with the aux, it'll technically be a mono guitar with a stereo effect on it if I want like a big rake and I just want things to bloom and move out that way. But yeah, for the church music thing, it was I think glue is the best way I could describe it. It's just getting those effect hard left and right. Just always felt like it was gluing the part into the mix a little bit better. And yes, certainly as I got older, it was about leaving room for that vocal.
I love it. I'll avoid all brown nosing other than to say you do it really, really. I guess I'm not avoiding it. You do it really well. You have just a keen sense about how to layer parts.
Thank you.
It's a real gift. Mason.
Yes.
Studio geekery. Come on, you're up.
Okay. So we're talking wet, dry, wet, huh?
All right. So yes, we are. So what would you define as the true vintage 80s rolling rack definition of what the wet, dry, wet looked like back in the day?
Yeah. So maybe it'd be a good place to sort of start based on where I think a lot of people are kind of coming to, a lot of people are coming into this. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Can you see that?
Hang on. Let me. Unfortunately, when you no, that'll work. What happens is because I've got a dual monitor set up, it wants to go all the way over. But I think you're good. Is the rightmost effect the fuzz on your screen?
Yes.
Good. We're good. We're fine.
Yeah, so I think that this is the interpretation that many people, at least when I see now talking about wet, dry, wet, or wet, dry, this is how they're interpreting it. This is not, in the classical sense, a wet, dry, wet system, but essentially you have your distortion, your things that are not moving any of the, or moving any sound in terms of, modulating, delaying it, reverb. If these are just the dry effects, there's a splitter that comes after them that goes into one amp, which is the dry amp. And then all the effects then continue to a wet amp. So you really have every single effect into one amp, and then the other amp has an abbreviated number of the effects, just overdrive and fuzz in this case. And so a lot of people are calling that wet, dry, or if it was wet, dry, wet, the modulation, delay, and reverb would be in stereo, and there'd be another amp on the right side of the dry amp, and that would be wet, dry, wet, according to what the kind of a lot of people at this point in time believe to be true about this. Now, by contrast, if you were to do it using that same format and you were to try it in the way that would be most accurate to how it was done in the kind of by the time the late 80s came around, it would look more like this. So this is kind of using the same sort of basic principle. So you'd have your guitar going into the fuzz and the overdrive that would go into the input of the dry amp. Then you would need a line out box, or you would need a line out on your amplifier. This is basically a line out box is something that connects between it basically takes the output transformer and pads it down to line level. So you would kind of connect both of your speaker cable and the speaker input of the amplifier to this, kind of like in an input and a through, and then it has this line level out, which would feed a parallel mixer. And then your delay, reverb, and modulation would all have to be capable of doing what's called kill dry, or 100% wet, and preferably have an analog dry through. The returns of these would all go into the parallel mixer that would then feed the wet amp or another wet amp if it were to be in stereo. The wet amp would just be the power amp section only, however. A lot of guys would use stereo power amp rack units at this time, or you could alternatively use powered monitors for this if you wanted for the wet side. So there's a couple of different interpretations of ways that you could do this, but essentially you're only getting the returns of the modulation delay, reverb, 100% wet, and you're acoustically mixing those in with the dry sound. So that is sort of a really simplified way to kind of talk about it. And I can show you, old Steve Lukather diagrams that one of my friends had drawn up for me. If you're interested in seeing that, although it may be complicated for some people to understand the signal routing because it's got things on there that some of you have probably never seen in terms of old Rain parallel mixers and things like that.
I double dog dare you.
All right, we'll bring it up. Let's share this thing. So this is an early, more of a stereo wet. This kind of predates wet dry, but this is essentially what they were going for. Was the thing that people need to understand about how this developed is that all these effects that you're seeing here. So it starts with the guitar up in the very top left that goes into a Mesa Boogie 2C plus head. And then this goes into a load box. So the load box essentially would have been the dry cabinet in future iterations of this. But because at this point they were just trying to run stereo, there was no dry cabinet on stage. So it was just loaded with a resistive load. This predates reactive loads, which is what most of us would use now if we were loading an amplifier without a speaker. And then the load box was going into this sort of switchers. This is kind of like an old school rack unit of a loop switcher that would be MIDI controlled. And you'd have your EQ, your DBX 160, which is a compressor, and a digital reverb.
Mason,
yes.
Bonus points. What's the call numbers for that digital reverb?
For the Ibanez one?
Yep.
I don't remember. Which one is that Ibanez digital reverb?
I think it was the DR9 or the DR100. Somebody on this is going to know it.
I'm sure somebody will. There's a bunch of Lukather fans out there that would know this because this is one of his old rigs. And then they have the harmonizer and a tri-stereo chorus. And basically the loaded down guitar amp is actually feeding through the whole entire time. So you basically just have what was equivalent to a stereo system of the day. They just didn't have the stereo pedal effects that would line up with the studio effects, because all the studio effects that these guys were using were designed for a mix bus, so like an H3000 or things like that. They only had XLR inputs and outputs. So you had to use these sort of mixers like this Rain SM26 to even be able to use them effectively in a guitar context, because they were always 100% wet. And so this would allow you to mix in the dry signal with the wet signal in a parallel mix. And at the very end, it goes into the Roland SDE delays and then back into more boogie heads into these 212s. But it's a kind of a way different thing than what we have now. And really, I did a video on this recently, but the reality is if the stereo pedals now, if they had those back then and the availability of the pedals, they would have just run, a typical stereo system like Pope would run, because it's essentially sort of the same signal path they were trying to achieve. They had their distortion, which in this case was coming from the amps. It was going into all this series of effects, some of them in parallel, some of them in the mixer. And it wasn't because, that's what they would have preferred. That was just the only way that you could use them at that point. Now we have, nice digital delays that have a mix of dry and wet, and you can adjust that yourself. So there's a degree to which, you could just say, to heck with it and just wire a really nice stereo rig with great distortion pedals and great modulation pedals and delays and reverbs and put it all in series in front of an amp. This was just kind of out of necessity and they wanted to try to adapt using the gear that all the guitar guys are using in the studio and put them into something that was mobile that they could take to sessions or they could take on the road.
I'm going to be the cantankerous old guy and be slightly disagreeable about some of this. I found, and then, man, hang on. Mason, I'm going to unpin you here for a second. Unfortunately, it's small. And let's see here. And let me get this guy up here for a quick second. Let's see here. So, the interesting thing is my recollection of this rig was, and the funny thing is this is the rig you're describing here, Mason. So let's see if I can get to this relatively easily without causing too much major destruction here when I share desktop. The other thing that starts to happen, and I'll warn you in advance, is when I go to sharing the desktop. Let's see, yeah, that's going to happen there. That sometimes it wants to do this bizarre thing with where the share desktop icon goes. Share screen. So let's see how we do. Where is Luke? Okay, give me just 1 second. Obviously that minimized. 1 second. All right. So I found a vintage version of that ad. And there we are. Okay. Let's see if it'll actually stay up this time. Okay, let's go over here. I actually thought that there was a center cabinet back in the day when he was running this. There we go. And you guys should be able to see that. Well, okay, fine. Now you can see it.
What year would this have been?
By the hair, that's about 85.
Okay, yeah, because the one that I had, it was about 84, and then slightly after that, they would start to move the dry cabinet on stage, or they would leave the dry cabinet off stage and they would use speakers only because they found that the reactive load from the speakers was actually a more accurate representation when they were feeding that dry signal and blending it with the 100% wet.
Absolutely. So Mason, you can see this, right?
I can see it.
Kind of. Okay.
Well,
so
yeah, but I can see the Mesa Boogie. Looks like some sort of Mark II or Mark III.
So those on the far left and the far right are the 180 watt boogies. They had a larger chassis.
The Coliseum.
There you go. And then the one on the top is what I believe is going to be a Mark IIc. And those are the Mark IIc Coliseums. Neil Sean was using those in that era. I have two of those. I don't have the 212s. I have two of the 412 versions of those cabinets. And there were two versions of those. One that came with the Eminence loaded on the top and the bottom. And then yes, and then the other was a vintage 30 on the top, and the Electro Voice on the bottom. So what it enabled you to do is when you were back by the amps, you got the breakup of the vintage 30, but when you were further away, you had the tightness of the EVs, and the more preferable version of those is the ones that have the vintage 30 on the top and the EVs. I've got the ones that have the Eminence on them. And they actually are great cabinets. The other thing about them, which I'll presume, Mason, that you know, and St. Pope, I will presume as well, without making any presumptions, simply because I was around when the dinosaurs were roaming LA with these things. The upper cabinets open back, or the upper half of the cabinets open back. So they basically gave you the tightness of a 412 when you needed the punch, but for the cleans, it gave you the ability to have that airiness that you really wanted. Those were wonderful, wonderful cabinets, and they still sound great today.
Was there a partition that would separate the top half from the bottom?
That's exactly it. And if you're watching Craigslist, you can pick them up for $350 on a good day. There's a guy that's selling an empty one. Actually, a guy named Danny Jones, a guy I know from back in the day, who has one that he's selling for. You know Danny?
I know of him through Paul Trombetta.
Exactly. So. So he had an empty one that came up for sale just at the beginning of the whole COVID thing, and I was like, no. I was like, there's no speaker cabinet worth dying for. Not that I thought that he was necessarily suspect.
Spring Lysol.
Yes. So in any case, so my understanding was, as you saw the three heads there, and the interesting thing is, I'm fairly certain at one point, as you pointed out, that there was a center cabinet that was the dry cabinet, and that's the whole deal. Is that you're blending in, and he would have been using Anybody want to guess the brand of expression pedal that he was using?
Oh
Is
man.
that to the audience or is that to us?
That's to whoever.
Probably a Boss FV100.
There it is. Mark Swanson, what's going on, man? Hey, and Scott, how you doing? Sammy, what's happening, dude? Jack, thanks so much. Glad you're digging it. That's exactly what it is. So I was at NAMM before Jeff Picaro died, and I think it was the last NAMM performance of Toto, and Lukather's got this crazy rig, and they're playing Jake to the Bone, if you've ever heard that track. And they go to the double time thing, where they take the 7 and it's just nuts. But, so when it goes down to the broken down thing and the swells happen, what's really interesting is that if you compare kind of some of the stuff that was happening in that era to the praise and worship stuff, there are things that are parallels in between there. I don't necessarily think that they happened one looking back at the other because, there's 20 years in between them. But at the same time, I think guitar players kind of go, that's really cool. And so the neat thing is that you're able to use those outside cabinets to simply bring in the pure delay signal to blend that in with the direct signal, which is absolutely lovely. Mason, take us to the next level of geekery. Where are we going next?
As far as the evolution of wet dry or jumping to another topic completely. I don't know how you want to take this.
I'm giving you free reign to go anywhere in gear geekery that you want to go.
Well, I think that we were talking about sort of the bridge of some of this stuff in worship music. One thing that I don't know, I mean, I suppose people of a certain age that are, have been listening to CCM for a while, but kind of during this refrigerator rack era, he was playing with Steve Perry from Journey and was using, a refrigerator rack and having to emulate all the studio tones of guess who? Steve Lukather, Michael Landau, those guys that played on the record. And so he was pretty familiar, and I believe he did have some sort of Bradshaw rig. If it wasn't wired by Bradshaw, certainly somebody who was trying to kind of emulate the same thing, and I think he, even though I think in the worship community, he was known more for just like being a really simple, like line 6 kind of guy and having very simplified gear, he certainly cut his teeth in the era of sort of the tail end of the glory days of the refrigerator rack and stuff like that. And so I'm kind of curious, if actually kind of almost a question for you, Doug, is, in some of those early Lincoln Brewster things before Line 6 was really even a thing, do you recall ever seeing him using like the Steve Perry rack, like with a worship team or something like that, just came out with R2D2, like, his refrigerator rack just blinking lights and strobe tuner in the rack and all that stuff? Because I think he definitely had a really huge influence on guitar playing, as it sort of evolved to how we know it now, and certainly had an incredible tone. I mean, on some of those, I've seen some YouTube stuff of him in the early 90s, and he's just like playing Hendrix, and he's just like shredding so hard, can play Van Halen stuff like perfectly. Even in some of his services now, I saw him do something where he was like just kind of started playing Eruption a little bit and then like stopped himself. But he's got so much chops, it's insane.
Well, the funny thing is he did this drive-by Eruption thing during the social distancing for people. I don't know if you saw that. It's on his Facebook. It's really funny. The internet did its little when you said Lincoln Brewster, but it was pretty obvious who you meant. So let's see if I can do a screen share here and not destroy this again. Let's see before I do this, because this is vintage Lincoln. So the deal is that I know that Lincoln obviously spent well, first of all right, I get to tell the story here because I get to. No, the room's too messy. So I have 4 vintage plexi and or metal face vintage Marshalls, and there's a guy here in the San Francisco Bay Area that basically works on Joe's amps, Kirk's amps, Lincoln's amps, and the guy that loans me these vintage Marshalls. And so I was up at Lincoln's place doing a live stream, and he needed some work done on the amp, so I've got his amp, and I'm going to take it up there. Actually, back up to him on Thursday. So he's got this lovely 69 plexi that is minty. And so, he's an amp geek, right? I mean, yeah, no, it's a thing. All right, let's see if we can get there. Hang on a second. Share screen, and there we go. Come on, Link. Now the thing is, last time, yeah, it did the same thing last time. Like it shows it's selected, but no. So I got to drag this up here. There we go. There is young Lincoln Brewster. Look at the kid.
The hair, man.
Look at
the hair is where that's where it all comes from.
Farming. So that, by the way, is also an Ernie Ball Music Man with a.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool just to kind of see the evolution. So I don't know for a fact that there was a big giant rack, but I would be very surprised if there wasn't. And yeah, and one of the things that was neat, and I'm tempted to make it a segue into sharing that Michael Pope chart, but I think I'm going to wait on that a little bit. But the thing is apparently they rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, and that was one of the things that they were really, really ready when they went out, and that band was tight. The other thing was, who was it talking about that the other night? Steve Vai. Steve Vai basically said before they ever walked into the studio, before they ever played a gig, the David Lee Roth band rehearsed for a year. And that, he was just saying that, that Dave was like, they would go running every day, they would go to the gym. And basically what Steve said was, Dave made a rock star out of him. He said, look, I've been doing this rock star thing for a minute, to paraphrase. Wow. Let me kind of walk you through this, which is kind of a fascinating concept. I am going to take this moment to segue here. There we go. All right, let me see if I can do this as a screen share that you guys can see. There we go. Michael, that should look rather familiar.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can minimize this a little bit.
Sure does. Looks colorful.
So you want to just walk that through? Why don't you go ahead and do your thing?
Yeah, sure. So when we first talked about this, we were just talking about kind of how I learn new songs. I think any one thing maybe a little unique to any church guitar player is that oftentimes you're learning new songs every week. For me in this instance, Kim asked me to go play a show with her in Atlanta last minute, and I realized, oh man, I've got some learning to do. Like I haven't played any of her music in a very, very long time. So basically just to kind of break the sheet down and to kind of break things down into how I learn a song for the first time and get it quickly. On the far left side, you'll see the arrangement for the song. So all the letters in black, in V1, PC, C1, standing for things like intro, pre-chorus, chorus 1, verse 2, all those kind of things. So I'll just listen through the song and I'll kind of get that song arrangement down. Once I've got that all charted out, I'll do the section you see in red, and that just counts for all the chord changes in the song. Here I'm using the Nashville number system. That's just kind of how things go in my world most times. And then lastly, in blue, you'll see kind of more specific notes in terms of the parts that I'm playing. But basically, between those, 3 different sections, that's really everything I need to know to play the song. And typing it out or actually like writing it out with my hands is like a really, really great way to memorize this stuff, because I don't want to be looking at a chart, when I'm playing on a stage, whether it's a church service or whether it's like an event like we were doing with Kim. I never want to be looking at a chart on stage. So that's just kind of a way I found to quickly learn things. At this point I can get most of that listening through the song the first time, maybe the second time, and using my ears to kind of make up the difference. But as we were kind of talking about charting and learning songs and rehearsing, that's just kind of the way I've learned to do it over the years. And then at some point, if I'm still maybe forgetful of a part before we go on stage or something, then I've got that chart to look back on my phone or in my notepad or something as a quick reference. And again, it tells me all the information I need to know about the song to get through it. So yeah, that's just kind of a quick breakdown. And then, I mean, you can see in the outline there, kind of just an even maybe more, maybe a better breakdown of how I, got to charting all that stuff down. But that's just a quick run through for you there.
That is efficient, and I love that. And I love the way you've kind of written the chart in line there from top to bottom.
Yeah.
I quite often will write it
Yeah.
across.
Sometimes saying like, just the thing with the Nashville number system is sometimes it leaves a lot kind of left hanging. Like it doesn't really say, if a chord's held out for a certain count or something like that. So charting it that way with those slashes representing, the bar, the beat, or however you want to look at that, it's just a little bit more thorough, I guess, for me to know where those chords are falling. Or even, I mean, anybody who's played in church for a while will know the old chord sheet where you have the chords kind of scratched above like the lyrics for the song. And those have just always been a nightmare for me. Like I feel like the chords are always, written above the wrong word or, or something. So, again, doing it that way was just kind of the quickest, most efficient way for my brain.
That's presuming the chords are actually the right chord. It's kind of like multiple choice, like A, B, or
right.
C. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like we're gonna go to the 6 here. Well, which 6? Because there's about 106 chords to play on the guitar.
That's awesome. So, Michael, what sort of stuff do you practice? What do you go over to kind of stay at the top of your game?
Yeah. Practice for me is kind of divided into 3 parts. The most important thing for me is I want to be learning music. I don't want to get caught up in too much theory or that kind of stuff like that. For me, at least, that gets boring really, really fast if I'm just playing scales or something like that. And even though that is, I would say that's the second part of my practice routine, is, that stuff is all good to know. Keep practicing music, learning new songs or a new genre or a new technique or something like that is kind of first and foremost for me, just because I never want to get locked into that place where like I'm trying to come up with a new part and all I can think of is a scale or an exercise or something like that. Like keeping music first and foremost is the thing for me. So most of what I'm doing is like, oh, I heard a Chris Stapleton song today, so I want to go learn that. Or like, oh man, like my father-in-law was listening to Rush in the garage, so I better go learn, some riff or some part for that. Or, I got a couple weeks ago, I got started listening to like Van Halen 1 a little bit. And, it's just kind of whatever's inspiring me and whatever comes up, whether it's on the radio or, or it's just kind of around the house or whatever it is, if there's a song or, I mean, it could be a commercial, on the television and I'll be like, oh, I've got to, go play that little melody. So that's kind of the first part for me. And then, theory and that would kind of be the second part. And for me, I really only go as far as I need to go with theory. So if I find myself, being unable to communicate with another musician on a session or, kind of hit a rut where I don't have the technique to follow through with what I'm hearing from listening to music, that's kind of when I jump into theory. And then the last part is just messing around with pedals and amps and guitars and gear. And I feel like people don't really count that as practice, but I think that's a really important part of practice. If whether you're, in my position or not, like you should know how your pedals work and you should know how many different sounds you can get out of your ultraphonics pedal and, how it interacts with different guitars and different amplifiers and those kind of things. So that's kind of the third part of my practice. And if I'm tired of learning new material and I just kind of want to, disconnect my brain a little bit, then that's kind of what I'll practice.
I love it. And that is a perfect opening for our next segue. Let's talk Dumbles. Let's talk the ultraphonics. Let's just go there. The secret amplifier. So
Yay.
there, Michael. Are there? Well, stupid question. Are there any stores that you've been wandering into lately? No. They may be, but you haven't been wandering into the stores. Um,
Yeah.
but you know the neat thing about being in a place like Nashville, or interestingly enough Seattle, there are these boutique stores where these amps appear. Mason,
Oh yeah.
we have had some shared experiences with some of the same amplifiers, thanks to Envy Kaiser. And Michael, you're part of that party because the ultraphonics is actually the distillation of that. And so, Mason, why don't you kind of talk about how you kind of got? Well, okay, actually, I got to tell a story. Hold on, I got to tell a story. So, and and hopefully nobody's going to think I'm big noting because it's not. I was just like, it was just one of these experiences that's like the throne of tone. Um, I was at a guitar camp. After the guitar camp, there was a guitar festival, and Robin Ford was playing at the guitar festival, and it's I think it's called Iron Mountain, and it's in Colorado, and so my hotel room overlooked where the stage was. You could kind of see because it was down this lane, and the stage was kind of over here. And I'm hearing this thing, and the Dumbles have what's called a PAB, preamp boost, where it basically bypasses the tone stack. And it's when you hear it at concert volume, it is a sound that is literally like the sound of heaven opening, and the loudest, purest, most lovely, slightly distorted, saturated guitar with Robin Ford playing. It just went from being, this beautiful tone to this super loud, thunderous guitar sound. I'm like, I know exactly what that guy just did. He just stepped on the PAB pedal or the foot switch, and it's so again preamp boosted basically means the tone stack's out of the way. Mason, you spent time around that amplifier, and Robin, so like he's an endorser of yours, and that amp. Let's start there because that amp is hallowed ground, and then we can work our way back to our mutual friend.
Yeah. So Robin, when I first met him, he actually had two Dumbles. He had one that was built for him sort of after he kind of had used them on some of his albums, because a lot of the first records that he did with a Dumble were actually rentals that he told from Andy Brower in LA. And then, he eventually had his own made. And I actually had one of those Dumbles, the black Dumble that he had it shipped to my house because he was doing a tour that I think started in Oakland at Yoshi's. And so he had, the company that stores his gear in North Hollywood ship me the amp so it'd be ready to go, when he got there. So I remember we had this Dumble in our living room for like 10 days or something like that.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, I didn't play it. Not that he didn't, he told me not to do, he didn't give me any instructions as to what to do with it. He just asked if he could have it shipped to me so that, I guess the venue wouldn't take it, or I don't know what the conditions were. But certainly that amp was really magical, and that was a 100-watt head, but it was converted from a combo. It used to be a combo when he got it, a 112, and then he had later on converted into a head by Dumble.
But question, Mason, it's not really a Dumble anymore if you have it converted. Is that correct?
I guess it depends on who you ask.
Okay, go ahead. Please continue. That's an inside joke, and we're not going to follow that down the rabbit trail. But you were saying.
Yeah, so that was one of the amplifiers that he had, and then he has another one that's that's a tan one. I think he's kind of more famous for, or I guess he's more famous for using it because it's the only one that he has left, so it's kind of what he has to use. But one of the things that he had said to me when he shipped me this Dumble, at this point, I didn't have any Dumble emulating pedals. I had this boost though that he used, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be in a few days early. If you have any time, let's shoot some video on this boost pedal because it's the only pedal that I can use in front of my Dumble, which is a notoriously difficult amp to pair with any sort of gain overdrive, anything that's adding any volume to the front end, it historically is not good with those sorts of devices. And he's like, let's do a video. So we booked a place at 25th Street Studios in Oakland. He brought that Dumble in, and we spent probably 7 or 8 hours filming all sorts of videos that ended up being, a culmination of things that came together with the actual output of the Vertex Boost video, which really helped put that product on the map, and certainly having this endorsement was a huge way to seed that. But as I got to know him better, and I got to know other Dumble users like Henry Kaiser and this friend of mine, Owen Barry, who is a friend of Jackson Brown's, who has a couple Dumble that he had on loan. I had access to a pretty good stable of several different generations of Dumbles from the 70s through the 1990s. And the challenge, I guess the challenge and the blessing for me is that at that point in time, there was one company that had made a Dumble pedal that actually had a Dumble, which was Mad Professor. They had the symbol. But the Dumble that they had was sort of a more unusual one, and that it had EL34, so it kind of wasn't the standard that most of the people recognize when they hear a Dumble overdrive. They're thinking more about Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, Lowell George, David Lindley, these sorts of guys that kind of were famous users of the overdrive special, and those were all 6L6 versions. So I thought, well, this is a great opportunity. I have 4 of them at my disposal. We can figure out how this thing sounds. Really, because the idea is the Dumbles all sound different to a degree, but what's the baseline that we can emulate? Because people, you have any distortion pedal or overdrive pedal, you have your preamp and then the pedal, and then you're going directly into another tube preamp, assuming you have a tube amp, right after that, or a solid state preamp right after that. So to try to get all of the preamp in the pedal is sort of not really worthwhile, in my opinion, because you have to, even if you designed it one-to-one, the Dumble doesn't have a cascading second preamp that comes after the main preamp in the pedal. So the real magic is, how do you create the synergy between what's in the pedal, knowing that it's going to go into another preamp section with its own EQ and its own volume and gain controls and stuff like that. And that was sort of a criticism that I've seen leveled, is that, oh, you didn't do it a one-to-one clone. Well, there's problems in doing that, and that people are presumably going to use it into the front of an amp. So if you make a preamp pedal that's one-to-one with tubes and all that stuff, you're going tube on tube. You're already away from the X factor. 50% of the circuit or the signal path into the preamp is already changed. The other thing is that you can't get 250 volts in a pedal, which is the voltage presumably that you'd have on your 12AX7s if you were running in a Dumble, at least. And because we're running them at 9 volts. So running tubes at 9 volts, in my opinion, is a frivolous thing. The tubes are there for show, in essence. They're not doing any of the work that a tube would be doing in a tube amp. So I decided to make this completely op-amp based. And what we did is we took the amplifiers. We started with about 4 different circuit archetypes that I thought would be close to this. And I basically just put insert points in these breadboards, the way that you sort of prototype pedals. So I could say, okay, let's see what happens if we add more gain before the tone stack. Let's now try putting the tone stack in the feedback loop. All right, now let's see what happens if we change it to this op amp instead of this op amp. Or let's see what happens if we cascade the gain in this different way. Or let's see what asymmetrical clipping does versus symmetrical clipping. So it gave us this ability to basically, be able to try out a lot of things fast and be able to kind of see where the baseline was, and then start taking that to all the amps, and then creating what we found to be the commonalities between all of them, that then we could go back to a common backline amp, Hot Rod DeVille, Hot Rod Deluxe, and be able to say convincingly that we could get those tones. This culminated with me borrowing one of Henry Kaiser's Dumbles, one of the well-known ones that you've reviewed and has been, featured heavily on the internet, and putting 4 studio guys in a blind test to see if they could tell when we're sliding the faders back and forth while a player is playing, like some Robin Ford songs, and seeing if they can identify which one is the fake and which one's the Dumble. And none of them could tell more than half the time which was which. So to me, that was the ultimate metric. If I could get even 30%, I would have been happy. But we stumped these guys, and that was pretty great.
That's one heck of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a moment here because actually I stumbled across the Dumble. But this is let's see. I'm gonna play a couple of things hopefully without people so these are a couple of clips with the Steel String Singer. Oh, I've got a slideshow. Hang on a second here. Let's see how that. All right. So my only complaint about these clips, and it's funny, I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen when you demo something, you kind of go. 2 years later, I would have played it completely different. What's interesting is this is on I think I'm using a Grosh guitar on this, a Grosh Strat, but I'm playing much harder than I would now. But at the same time, it is what it is. So hang on, let me see what the difference between these two is. It the same clip? All right. So the great thing about this is we'll get a little bit of a. Okay, let's see. Let's see how I can do. Share the desktop. Go to the desktop. Share screen. Finder. I don't know. I apologize if I get the wrong Finder window here, but I'm believing it's this one. Oh, great. That's not what I want. There we go. That should be the clip right there.
That's a beautiful amp.
Oh, that amp.
Look at that suede covering, man.
Oh, man.
Fancy stuff.
That amp's about almost 3 feet long. It's almost 12 inches, maybe 12 inches tall.
Wow.
I had a crate when I was 13 that sounded just like it.
I was gonna say it sounds so familiar, but I gotta tell you, and it's not. Here's the thing about Henry that's kind of absolutely amazing, is that the first time I actually met Henry, so the Green Dumble, I went over to his place, and he was like, "Well, you want to borrow the amp?" Because he knew me, so like the Overdrive Special lived here for like 3 months. Like,
wow.
Oh no, it was, and the crazy part is at that point there were like 20 amps, like Metropolis and like all these crazy amps, and so like I would pass the Dumble on the amp row. I had a David Bray here, and just like just a crate, and I'll be like, I can't play you today. I've got to get these other amps. But the Steel String Singer, it's $100,000 amplifier. They're just crazy rare. And that one is documented. Mason, was that 003?
Yeah, I think that was 3 or yeah. So actually, check this out, Doug.
Oh, what you got? What you got?
You're probably gonna be bummed here. So here it is at.
Here comes Uncle Mason.
Here's 220 grand. There it is.
So is Henry selling it?
Ouch.
Yeah, it's sold. Henry only has the combo now.
My amp's gone.
Yeah. So Henry only has the combo, the 115 version, number 1. This one, $220,000. So what I'm trying to say here, Michael, is talk to Mrs. Pope. Rates are great right now for
right.
I second that. The time is now.
I'd have to sell our house and all of my gear, and then maybe I could afford that.
Oh, that kind of breaks my heart.
I'm sure she'd go for it.
Absolutely. Like, I fell in love with that amp. I mean, again, listening to that track, I'm like, now I would have played it soft, but at the same time, there was something about the way that thing reacted. You hit it as hard as you could possibly hit the front end. And the whole thing about the Steel String Singer is, first of all, amongst other things, that was the quote-unquote Stevie Ray amp.
Yeah.
So that was, all it was clean. And it's got, and it just, just an absolute, and you'll see Eric Johnson has one of that era that's in my, actually I can't play it because I'll get copyright struck. But my favorite version of Eric playing Cliffs of Dover, and I'm actually going to bring this back to you, Mason, is that he's using a pair of, well, he's got the Dumble, but it's on Austin City Limits, but it's a really early one. Let's talk about drip edge fenders.
Drip edge fenders.
Because
so
you've got a Bandmaster reverb, is that correct?
I have a lot of Fender amps.
But the drip edge that I saw, that's the head, what is that?
That's actually a super reverb that was put into a Bandmaster cabinet, into a head. And that's how I bought it. I bought it from my friend Tony Lowe, who's like a vintage guitar and amp collector, and he was moving to Ohio about a year ago, and he was selling kind of off a lot of the stuff that he had, and he had this 67 Super that was living at this amp technician's house in kind of like Marysville, kind of near Sacramento, and he was he just left it there. He didn't remember what condition it was. He left it there maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and he said, "Hey, give me $400 for it."
Whoa!
And we can, and you just have to go pick it up from him, and I'll pay for whatever work he's put into it so far. It turned out that this guy didn't do any work on it at all. So like there were no tubes in it.
Oh no!
It was missing the reverb tank. And it had all original iron and stuff like that, the important parts that you'd want. But one of my friends in Vacaville had a couple of original mid-'60s Super reverb tanks, so I was able to get that. But yeah, it's a 67 Super, but it's in a Bandmaster head from the same era. There you go. There's your Vibro Verb.
That's the amp.
The 115.
The 115. And
Oh, those are great.
Is that a reissue or is that a real 64?
that'll answer your question right there.
All right. Yeah, looks like a real one, huh?
So it's a funny story about this amp.
You got it at the Greyhound station?
No, not that kind of a funny story. I was on the treadmill listening to Stevie Ray, and I was going, okay, well, is it the fingers? Is it the amp? Obviously the fingers and the amp, but I was like, that particular sound. And so I happened to, it's really funny, there's a classified section of the gear page that I had never been on before, and I'd never been on since. And I just literally been listening to that amp that day, and I was like, man, I'm just curious. I go on there, this guy's, you know what it's like when you hear an amp on an iPhone and it sounds amazing, you're like, okay, I have to own this. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I was like, well, how am I going to, Michael, I share your pain. Because I was like, how am I going to go upstairs? It was $4,000. So it's not it's not like we're talking a $250,000. But it's still, it's like, hey, honey, I need another amp. It's only $4,000. It's just like,
Oh, yeah.
That does not, I don't know about you guys, that does not go over well. My wife is very accommodating, but that, so the thing is that I heard it and I was like, I just have to own this amp. It was just like, and the great thing about it is it's the original 15. They made 500 or so of them, and you plug in and it is just magic. Just, and I was born in 1964. So, that's kind of like, a thing for me. And and sadly, it's grossly underplayed.
There's something about birth year gear, man.
Yep.
Birth year gear. There's always something to it.
What was the guitar that we're going to get you? Wasn't there a birth year guitar that you were after? Michael, didn't we talk about that like a couple weeks ago? Yeah. It was a Gibson.
I don't know. I can't think of a birth year.
It was a Gibson.
I mean, I've been on the hunt for an SG or a Firebird forever, but I was born in '90, so I don't know how great those would be.
Wait, was it that it wasn't you that found the Sunburst Les Paul in Japan? Somebody I was talking to, like they found their
No.
birth year Sunburst Les Paul in Japan. They're like, I've got to have this guitar, and it was a one of those. It was a tobacco Sunburst custom. So yeah, I'm glad it
Okay.
wasn't you because
Well,
honestly,
I only
that
got
guitar's
one piece of birth year gear, and it's not even my birth year.
So, Michael, do you have a favorite guitar?
Oh man, that might. I mean, yeah. I mean, probably that gold top that Casey built me. That's probably the nearest and dearest. Yeah, but that's at the shop with him right now, so I'm missing that one currently. But that's I mean that goes with me everywhere.
Mason, that Strat that I kind of have seen you playing a bunch. What year is that?
That one back there is actually a Rory Gallagher custom shop that I got at Chicago Music Exchange maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago or something like that.
What about the three-tone Strat with the big headstock that I saw you playing a bunch?
That's
There we go. Come on.
This is get my mic right. This is a copy of the Dan Huff James Tyler modified 65 Strat, but it's made by LSL.
Sure.
So I basically gave him, a bunch of photos and the specs. So it's routed like a 65 Strat, but then they rerouted for the humbucker and then routed for a Fender tremolo, vintage tremolo, but then they rerouted for a Floyd and, and added the 21st or the 22nd fret, on it. So it's got all the, and it's got the Marzio kind of early era noiseless pickups, and it's got the Jim Tyler secret humbucker in the bridge, which I think is just a modified JB. But it's a very studio sounding guitar. I mean, it's passable for a Strat probably on a recording, but it compared to the Roy Gallagher one, like it's not going to be quite that. But it's a very quiet, light, easy to play. I'm a big Dan Huff fan, so that was kind of what I wanted to do with that. Instead of buying a 65 Strat and just butchering it.
That's not well received these days.
Yeah, that's for sure.
There was a guy when I was at MI had a 57 Battleship Gray maple, obviously Strat, put I think it was a Wonder Bar on it, which was like it was either that or Kaler, but whatever he did to it, he basically permanently disfigured the paint job and the body in the process of doing that. It was a criminal act that it would be punishable by death in some countries. Oh man!
Don't do that.
It's tough, man.
Yeah, no, it's Michael. It's 12:30 there. Is that correct?
Almost 11:30. But I'm doing good, man.
Okay.
I burn that midnight oil on a regular basis. So
all right, okay. Then I'm good to keep going. So let's talk about picking a great guitar. Like it's an interesting thing because I realize when you have a rack of different guitars, you quite often pick them for different reasons, right? Let's start with the Strat. So
yeah.
Michael, you got that black Strat. And my first Strat was a 3-bolt neck, so except for the drummer that used to purposely twist the neck to make it go, which did not sit well with me, as you might imagine. What makes a Strat great? I mean, it seems obvious, but I'm going to go down my extended question list in that.
Yeah.
The neck, the number 4 pickup selection, but also what happens when you get into the bridge, all the things that are nuances to you guys. What are the nuances that you look for, and how much do they play into the total picture? Boom.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I kind of come at it from the perspective of like, I could have 6 of the same strat, you know, or 6 of the same guitar of any guitar, and they'd all sound a little bit different. And so sound is always something that's in my head. If I look at it and it, you know, and I play it and it's kind of got that sound in my head that I feel like it's going to have, then, you know, that's fine there. But in terms of the feel, like I'm looking for string tension on a guitar, because I mean, for me, I don't know, like strats especially, like I feel like I've picked up so many strats over the years, and like it just feels really stiff. Like even, you know, 10 sets, and that, I mean, that might even be part of the reason I keep that thing a half step down sometimes. But I'm just looking for that string tension to kind of connect with the sound in my head, if that makes sense at all. Like it's just that feel under the fingers when I bend a note or hit a chord, and it, I want to be able to hit it and not have it get too loose, but not have it too stiff. Like I'm looking for that perfect medium, that perfect tension. When I lay into it, when I lighten up, mixed with, whatever sound I hear in my brain when I look at the thing, which I realize is retarded. It's just kind of always been the thing for me. Like I'll see a guitar on a wall and be like, ooh, like, okay, that's got, that's an old Silvertone with gold foils in it. So it's got to have this kind of thing, and I'll pick it up, plug it into an amp and listen for that preconceived idea. And then think about, okay, well, how does this feel under the fingers? And that's usually been my criteria for, purchasing guitars.
I love it. Mason, what you got?
Well, the criteria that I usually look for in a Strat is I don't buy it unseen, and that's hard for a lot of us because depending on where you live geographically in the world or in the country, you don't necessarily, you're not going to have access to play a lot of volume of instruments to really sort of be able to sort what you like and what you don't like, to the same degree of somebody could that has a lot of them. And my experience with Strats is actually unique in that I used to have a friend that was one of the directors of the custom shop, and so I would be able to go and play 20 models of a specific custom shop instrument that was going to go Sweetwater and all these different places. And it really helps you sort of calibrate what makes a really good version of that instrument for what your taste preferences are and what doesn't. And I think that there's a few things that transcend that in a Strat. 7.5 pounds to maybe 7.25 pounds, I think is pretty important for the kind of classic Strat sound. If you get too light, it starts to become really thin and bright sounding. If it gets too heavy, it can get a little bit too honky, and it starts to not have the scooped nature of a Strat. So there's sort of a finite sort of place that you kind of need to fall in terms of the weight. And obviously there's factors within that can influence the sound. Maybe more of the weight is in the neck or in the body, and it can feel imbalanced. And so there can be caveats to that. But I think it's a general baseline, try to stick in that kind of 7.5 pound range. I think the second thing is, if you really want it to be playable, going for 100% vintage Strat at this point in time is really not advantageous. So having a 7.25 radius and really small frets, if you're planning to do any sort of bending or you want to have any dexterity on that instrument, that's a really difficult instrument to play. And you have to have the action really high to compensate for that, which makes it even more difficult to play. And I think a lot of players who are converting to a vintage Strat for the vibe or for the tone, which it certainly has, but you want it to be 100% vintage, you may want to investigate and try some of those instruments before you really dive in. All the ones that have at least a 9.5-inch radius, or like the one that I have back here, the one that I showed you earlier, the Dan Huff one. I think that's a 10 to 16 compound, so it's 10-inch radius, on the first fret, and then it kind of flattens out as you get up on the fretboard, and it's really comfortable and easy to play. I also look for bigger frets. So 6105s at a minimum. That Dan Huff one has 6100, so really, really big frets, which I think for some players would be too big. But I think at least 6105s are really comfortable, easy to bend fret, easy to get around on, is kind of a good in between. And I think the last thing that I would say is that a lot of people are attracted to flamed necks or figured necks or roasted necks. And if you're a traditionalist, or you at least want to stay somewhat close to traditional, which is kind of where I go, I think having just a really plain rock maple neck is the most solid, because I had some flame maple necks, even with Fenders that were custom shops, and they were very difficult to dial because they it's an imperfection when you have flame in a maple neck or a bird's eye. It's not something that is going to be stable inherently because it's a defect, but we like the way that it looks in furniture and things like that, and so we attribute that is a benefit in most cases to guitar. But I usually look for the plainest rock maple. It is usually the most stable for the neck on a Strat, and so that you don't have to worry about adjusting the truss rod all the time or doing all these adjustments. And so like that Roy Gallagher one has a really sort of plain, uninteresting maple for the neck, and I've never had to adjust it after the first adjustment. It's really stable, and equally with a lot of my other Fender custom shop guitars, they don't have the most impressive necks or anything like that, but you never have to touch them. And to me, that's really valuable, because we're using them mostly for videos and stuff like that. And having stuff that's out of tune and dealing with that, it can be really problematic and can be really distracting to hand somebody a guitar that they're constantly having to adjust. So those are my advices for Strats.
That's awesome. You know, the interesting thing, let's see if that does. There we go. Michael, you had mentioned, the kind of, you mentioned a bunch of things, the expectation of what an instrument is going to be like. One of the demo guitars that I kind of had to retire, the interesting thing about, an instrument, every instrument's got a voice. And if you keep reaching for the same guitar, you kind of keep playing the same demo, which is a danger, where you're like, oh, this thing does that so well. So I finally had to go, I got to put it down. But it's a road-worn Strat. I got it for like, a buddy of mine, Critter, picked it up in Sacramento on Craigslist for like, I think $750. And I knew exactly what the guitar was going to be unplayed. I was just like, I know it. He brought it down. It sounded bad with 9s, but I was like, I'm going to tune it down a half step. I'm going to put 10s on it, and it's going to be awesome. It was a funny thing, because like up until that point, I wasn't doing a lot of tuning down a half step, but I instantly played that when I was like, it was almost one of those things where I didn't even think about it. It happened so fast, like, oh, I'm going to tune it down a half step and put 10s on it. It's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
How did you do that on your own, or did somebody take a guitar that you had so that, it's going to sound better tuned down a half step? How did you make that journey?
I've always just kind of followed my own ears and my own heart with all of it, man. Like I've never, I feel like there's so many people that get hung up on, oh, you got to have some new guitar, some boutique guitar, or a classic guitar, or a, handmade this or that. I'm just looking for instruments that speak to me and that have colors that inspire me to play. And if I can, at the end of the day, if I can wind up with a guitar that I want to play, I'm happy. Like, genre and sound is always, for me, kind of lived here. I'm like, if I can't accurately play a country lick or a rock lick or something, like, it doesn't matter what guitar I have in my hands. Like, it's not going to sound like the thing. And so no matter what guitar I grab, I just try to spend time with it and bond with it. I'm a little bit romantic about it in that sense. And then it's just whatever I feel the guitar is telling me. Like, with this Strat, I ran 11s on it for a long time. And the more I was doing studio and session work, I just felt like that string was just, it wasn't helping the feel of the guitar. So I went down to 10s, and I was like, okay, like this is closer to the sound of what this guitar should sound like in my head when I just look at the thing on the stand. And then after living with 10s for a while, I was like, there's still something not quite right. I want a little more of a loose feel. And being that this is a kind of the 70s Strat vibe, like I think of players like the Edge or something more so than like a John Mayer or a Stevie Ray Vaughan, with a guitar like this. And so just, trying to think about that tone and, what inspires me about that. I was like, well, I know Edge drops a lot of guitars a half step down, and he's very song specific with things. So I just tried it a half step down. And even, part of it was too, a month or so ago, even diving into like the Van Halen 1 stuff. Like Van Halen did a lot of stuff half step down. And so, jamming along to, I'm the One or something, was like, okay. And just dropping the guitar, I was like, okay, like this finally connects and makes sense with what I'm feeling in my head and in my heart. And so now when I pick up this guitar, like I know what to expect. I know what color it is, if that makes sense. I don't know why so much of this stuff relates to color for me, but I'm just searching for any instrument, whether it's vintage, new, or in between. Like I'm just looking for that preconceived idea I've got in my head to kind of line up. And most of the time, at this point, I can figure out if a guitar is going to get there just from playing. Like I'm not one of those guys that likes to goop with different pickups and all that kind of stuff a lot. I prefer to just find a guitar that works. But like there's still kind of fine tuning between string gauge and pickup height and all these different things. So it's just a matter of sitting with the guitar and looking for what the guitar likes to be up as. That makes sense. That's kind of always been my approach to it.
I love that. Mason, before we geek out into the string, because my guess, and I could be wrong, but I have a feeling I'm not. I've always been looking for a person that's actually going to give me the straight answer about the magnetic capacitance, if you will, of strings and how that impacts the magnetic.
The resonance.
Well, first of all, every string has, first of all, because Michael, you're still using the NYXLs, is that correct?
Yeah, on a couple of guitars, I'm trying the Stringjoy stuff right now. They're kind of the local Nashville company that I've been trying out. But I think I'm probably going to stick with the NYXL for stuff. They just kind of feel like home right now. So yeah, that's what I'm into, even though what's on the guitars right now is a little different.
So the thing is, if you think about, the magnetic potential of the pickup and a string that has more interactive with the magnetic, what's the field. So the less that a string has, the less that a string is affected.
Less surface area of the string.
Not the surface area. So if you change the, so certain metals are more responsive to magnets than others.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get two different metals that have the same amount of volume, but one is going to interrupt the magnetic field less. Mm-hmm. So it amazes me that string manufacturers don't talk about this. I'm absolutely kind of like, because if you think about the mechanics of a string and a pickup, you're disturbing the magnetic field, and it's not only the volume and the harmonic content and the transient content of the string, it's also the way it is this transductive interaction with the magnetic field. I'd be very curious, kind of, especially if somebody's immediately downstream with pedals until you start building amps, because I'm just going to read the wind and say, like, there's no way that Mason at some point isn't going to build an amp. I'm not even going to ask you. I'm not going to go there.
I'm not building an amp.
You know what?
That's a hard business to be in, man. If you build a good amp, it's like selling refrigerators. Like, when somebody has a good one, they don't need another one for 10 years.
Yeah, but the thing is, you've been in so many great amps, and you've been doing some magic with pedals. I will be shocked if 10 years from now, when we have this conversation, that if you're not like, yeah, fine, I couldn't help it, because you love to twiddle with circuits. So, love your opinion, and Michael, feel free to jump in, because I don't have a quantitative. I do have an experience. So there was an amp. It was the Metro. The Metropolis take on the 69 Plexi that was here. And I had a Les Paul that was here. and I broke a string. And I put another string on there, like innocently, like a dumb guitar player. And I'm like, something wrong with the amp. I think George. I'm like, there's something wrong with the amp, dude. I was playing and then I broke a string and I put it on standby and it came back. And I think he very nicely just went, you're an idiot, right? You know that, like, you change the string, it's going to have a different sound. And I think that's kind of where my whole realization of, like, it was night and day. It was, and I don't remember if I changed the whole set, which I think I did, but the guitar sound, like everything that was great about it was gone. And everything that was bad about it was magnified. And I was like, it was one of those moments I went, I had no idea. Mason? Michael?
Do you want to take that, Michael? Do you have a
Sure, man.
a string story?
I mean, I have two thoughts with that. I guess I've heard a lot of guys talk about, like, some guys will be like, "Oh man, why do juniors always sound better than specials? Because there's not a pickup up here pulling on the strings, or something like that." And for me, at the end of the day, I just wrap it back into everything is a different color. I've got guitars that sound awful unless they have a brand new set of strings on it. Like it needs a brand new set of strings. And then I've got other guitars that, like, I need a couple days, before it sits right and sounds well. And, guitars, especially the older they are, the more temperamental they seem to be sometimes. So it just, for me, it's always been a thing of, again, what is that specific guitar? What is it telling me it wants? Does it want a brand new string? For me, I've always kind of sided towards the new string thing. There's a consistency there. Like when I was on tour, every single guitar got a new set of strings every day. It comes down, I think, to like the acidity in your hands. Like I've got pretty crazy hand sweat, especially on a stage. So I don't know. It's every little factor, I think, changes it one way or the other. So it can be down to the individual touch and how acidic your hands are. It can be down to what the specific guitar wants with strings. Maybe a pickup with a different magnet is, pulling your strings a certain way with its magnetic field. It's like to a degree, like how do you quantify some of this stuff? Because there's so many variances, even just from, a player perspective. Like I'm sure the three of our hands all have different acidity levels, and, even if we played the same guitar with the same strings would sound wildly different. So yeah, I've just kind of always settled back on every little thing makes a difference. So what does the instrument tell me it wants to see? And then I just stick with that.
I think we should do a 23andMe of perspiration acidity.
We'll get one of those chlorine tests for a swimming pool and just like coat our hands in this stuff and see how that works.
Mine's
turns
black,
the right shade of purple, then.
I love it. I think we need to give away a Vertex boost. That's what I think we need to do.
All right.
So let's see. Let's see here. No, you know what? I said it was going to end at 10 o'clock. So I don't know if you guys have ever done a giveaway. Sorry, I didn't mean to yank anybody's chain, but people get very I had a bunch like people went off. Mason, you're laughing. You know what I'm talking about. Dude,
well, whenever you've done giveaways in the past, there is an expectation that Dad's going to come home with a snow globe from his trip every time there's a new live stream. Like why isn't there a giveaway today? We've had a couple of those.
I had that actually happen last week, and it was so fun. And here's the thing: it's like honestly, people enjoy it, and it's a cool thing. I mean, I like giveaways, so. But what I will do is I'm gonna wait until just before 10, just to honor what the time was on there, because I got read the riot act for like picking a winner like an hour early after it had been open for like 7 days.
Oh yeah,
dude, like they went off on me, and I think it was like a worship giveaway too. I was like, holy cow!
I'm just a player. Like don't have a company. I don't manufacture pedals for a living or anything like that. You know, I'm lucky and I get given stuff, and so I've given stuff away sometimes, and it's usually just stuff that's like, okay, this is cool, but this is probably just going to sit on my shelf, so I'll give it away or whatever.
Yeah. By the way, thank you for
Just
that.
from like the 2 times I've. Oh, dude, anytime. I got you, man. If anybody needs a clone, I got a shelf full.
Yeah,
Well, I really appreciated the
I got
fact
one of those steel string singers back here too.
I just want to thank you for the EP4. That was very generous of you.
Oh, okay. Everybody's getting stuff, but no, man. I mean, I can totally sympathize. I feel like I get a new message at least a couple times a week of like, hey, man, you mind sending me one of those guitars you got? Hey, man, could you send me one of those pedals? Like, I'm like, dude, I bought these guitars with money that I worked for, just like you guys. Hold on a minute. I don't have that many snow globes.
That's so funny. That's awesome. Let's see if there's. Oh, you know what, Mason? Somebody had a question.
Okay.
And it was basically the difference between the Ultraphonics and the HRM. Kind of, so, and for those, Mason, you can tell people what an HRM is.
Sure.
Ah.
Yeah. So
I got one on hand, y'all.
Yeah.
Is that the giveaway for tonight? No. Sorry, Mason, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm gonna keep this one. Actually,
that one's in his reverb pile. So the Ultraphonics and the Ultraphonics HRM, although they share the first part of their name, they're actually completely different circuits. So there's almost maybe only 10 or 15% of them is the same. And how this came about is I had a friend of mine who is based in Paris, and he bought a Dumble HRM in the United States. And he said, will you keep this at your studio, because I'm going to be coming for the NAMM show in January, and I feel more comfortable just taking it back with me on the plane as opposed to having it shipped from LA to Paris. And I said, absolutely no problem. So the guy came and delivered this Dumble to our studio, an HRM version, which is one of the more rare versions, because typically, as we kind of talked about before, the Overdrive Specials had 6L6s in them. This had EL34s. So it was kind of like a combination of sort of a Marshall voiced Dumble. And this is very rare. There's very few of them that are out there like this. And so I asked my friend, I said, hey, would it be okay with you if, I'm not going to take the amp apart, but I'd like to take some sample settings, and I'd like to create a product based on this, because there's not a lot of these out there, and I'd like to have something out there that does this other Dumble sound that most of us have never heard before. And, songs that you might have heard an HRM on, the original Dumble HRM, all the Mr. stuff was recorded with that. So if you're out in the 80s, yeah. Also, a lot of the Tears for Fears stuff, like the outro solo on Everybody Wants to Rule the World, not the first solo, but the last solo, that's a Dumble HRM. So good. It's a great solo, and it's got, if you heard it, you probably think it was just like a really nice sounding Marshall, but it's actually a Dumble. So there's a lot of these classic songs that are out there, and I was like, man, we should really do this. So we went and did sort of the same thing that we did with the other Ultraphonics. And basically, if you want the classic Larry Carlton, Robin Ford thing, you want the original Ultraphonics. If you want to have something that's sort of like a combination, maybe you've heard some Dumbles and you're like, man, this is too mid-rangey, or man, this is a little too smooth. I don't really like Larry Carlton's elevator music. That's not what I think, but I'm just kind of speaking from, I'm assuming the personality of the naysayer, of the regular Dumble.
Douchebag. Oh, sorry, did I say that?
And so this is really more of an aggressive, martially sounding thing. It's got several more controls, because it has this accent, which is like a presence almost control on it. So we added an accent control. It has the same filter control range of the regular Ultraphonics, which is sort of the shared part of it. The gain stages are totally different. The whole breakup scenario is totally different. It actually has multiple cascading gain stages, and you can blend in the tone stack in parallel, which is really cool.
Really?
And ratio knob, So you can adjust the blend of the actual dry signal in with on the overdrive side. So you can kind of make it more like how the tone stack bypass would be, and then you can blend in the dry with the distortion, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty rad. And HRM stands for?
Well, there's different interpretations of some people said hot rubber monkey. That seems unlikely to me. I think it's more like hot rodded Marshall.
Hot Rodded Marshall is the one that I know. You know, Jim Seval apparently used to work with Dumble.
The speaker manufacturer.
Yeah.
From Scumbag.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. By the way, have either of you, Mason? My guess is yes, but been to the LA Amp show?
I have, yeah. Never as a demonstrator, but just as a passerby.
Michael?
I remember seeing all the videos on YouTube of guys walking through, you know, a hotel hallway and it just being an onslaught of amplifiers, but I never attended one myself.
It is like nothing. Mason, can I get you to back off on your mic just a little tiny bit?
Yeah. How's
Okay.
that?
That's better. Thanks. I've been remixing here and finally, why don't I just ask him to bring his mic down?
Sure.
So the LA Amp show is the only thing that I've ever been to that competed with the LA Amp show was Bass Player Live. Which the funny thing is that until you've been to an actual bass player event, you know, they say that guitar players, I'm not going to use the W word because I've already said D-bag, but guitar players have nothing on a room full of bass players. Like, the amount of this and the tapping, like, it was 2 days of 60 to 80 hertz of the most inconceivable din of low end, and the serious, it was a W fest. That's all I can say. But the thing about the LA Amp show is it's basically this row of hotel rooms where the doors are open, and the goal is to play as loud as is humanly possible as an incentive for people to come into the room. It's a fascinating thing. But at the same time, there's nothing. It's kind of like the NAMM show, but without the NAMM police. And it's every killer amp manufacturer in the world kind of there in the building. And the cool thing is eventually, like at about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, the thing winds down. And then the folks have a tendency to hang out. I just remember sitting at a table with Dave Friedman, Reinhold Bogner, and a couple of these other guys, watching these guys, you know, because the thing is that, you know, many of these guys are now part of Boutique Amp Distribution. But in those days, they were all kind of, you know, sizing up the boutique amp market. So it was just funny to kind of watch them engage each other. It was like a card game where there's like, well, you did that thing with the phase inverter. So they'd obviously been in each other's amplifiers studying them. So Mason, what was your LA Amp show experience like?
I mean, it was sort of like what I imagine being in like a Corvette car club or something is. It's all guys in the but you know, everybody who's there, I think, you know, just I think it's a the intent is to be sort of what NAMM isn't, that, you know, as you said, you can play really stuff at any volume, and you get to have a FaceTime with the brand, you know, which is sometimes difficult when you're at a NAMM show and you're kind of competing for time with distributors and all those different things. So I think in that sense, it's a nicer hang and certainly a more comfortable environment when you're sitting in a hotel room where they've cleared out all the beds, which is what they do, and then they put, you know, chairs and seats and stuff like that. And some of the manufacturers, you know, will fill up their bathtub with, you know, Coors and ice and stuff like that. It's kind of more of this. It's kind of the stepsister of, and so I think it's cool in that regard. But yeah, I think I only went maybe once or twice down to Van Nuys at the airport there, and you know, I think I mostly just went because other people that I knew were going, and so it was a chance to have kind of more of a social interaction, which I think NAMM is to a degree as well. But I hope we're not doing a promotion right now, and I just spoke poorly. And this is brought to you by the LA Amp Show.
And we want to thank Lonnie for his endorsement.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that climb, Lonnie.
So I know who won't be getting an invite to come down there and speak on any panels anytime soon. By the way, I want to congratulate Kyle Lassagard of Long Beach, California. You
Right.
won a Vertex boost in Fiesta Red. Congratulations.
Congrats.
We will be in touch. We'll get it to you as soon as we can get the shipping thing. It is ever so slightly back ordered, but not by a massive amount. And I will be your point of contact on that. And I will be solely responsible for making sure that thing gets to you safe and sound.
Be about
I don't know why I'm looking at the microphone. I'm looking the microphone in the eyes. How about that? So in any case, congratulations. Hey, it's 10 o'clock. I got a video to shoot. Yeah, the night's young. Gentlemen, as we potentially close out here, have we left any stones unturned of like guitar and amp and pedal geekery or anything that you guys want to chat about before we kind of dim the lights?
Oh man, I don't know.
Were there
I feel
questions?
like we went down the rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
Yeah, was there questions that came in that you thought like, oh, this is worth diving into for Tone's last stand?
Let's take a look. Let me see if I've got any questions.
What do
First
the
of-
commoners have to say?
I ordered my first Veritas. Can't wait. Congratulations, Nate. I wonder how many Veritas. Do you make a percentage for every worship guitar player that buys a Veritas, Michael? Because now I'm not making any friends
I
with
don't.
Casey. Because it's
I
just like
don't.
you've sold more Veritas than anybody, except for Casey.
I don't know, man. Yeah, exactly. Casey's got me beat on that one. No, I don't make any percentage or commission, not even off my my signature pickups or anything like that, man. For the most part, I think I've got like 7 or 8 of them now. I've paid for most of them, so it's just a brand that I believe in, and certainly for anybody touring or traveling a lot, I think that's where those guitars really, really, really matter. After touring with vintage style guitars for a long time, and just always adjusting them and mucking with them on the road, Casey stuff was just solid, and it's incredibly well built, and you can custom order now, or you can even get a guitar for like $1,200-1,300 USA made. He's making the pro line stuff in shop. So in terms of new instruments, I just don't think they can be beat. They're phenomenal. So good choice to whoever bought one.
Awesome. I do have a question that appeared here. It was on the Strat Talk. Any comments on rosewood necks on a Stratocaster? I'm going to go into a micro rant before I hand this off. There was a period of time where it became fashionable to take a maple neck that you could stick either a rosewood or a maple slab on top of, which I think Leo Fender would have like thrown a rod if he'd seen that being done. That's something that has fallen from favor, fortunately. And actually, the biggest offender that came to mind of doing that was actually not the F company. The idea is like a maple neck is intended to be, in my opinion, a maple neck, even if you do a skunk stripe down the back. I'm gonna go first person, then I'm gonna shut up. There are. I wonder if I can find it. So there's a photo of me sitting in with Joe Satriani and Neil Sean. And it was right around the time that I put out my last record, which was a decade or so ago. And Joe invited me to sit in. And I was like, if there's anybody that's going to be in the PA that's going to be the quietest, we know who that's going to be. And so I was like, what? I'm bringing the maple neck because it's going to give me that little bit of transient above the top where my articulation is going to be heard, because if there's anybody whose fader is going to be the quietest, and it's going to be mine, not in any way to slight Joe's front of house guy, but like it's Neil Sean and Joe Satriani. I'm like, I'm not dumb. So the thing is, I was like, I'm bringing the maple. It's an S540. It's actually one of the guitars I used on Guitar Hero, I think, But the thing is that I used it because of the fact that maple has that little bit of projection, which in the wrong setting is too forward. So the rosewood, I find I like that it's got the warmth and the glow of it. And then in certain instances, especially with like heavy metal, where you're looking for some of that transient of the pick attack to give that little extra bit of forwardness, especially when you got some delay again, kind of hugging you on the sides. So I found that I like them for different instances, not interchangeably, but kind of one or the other depending on what I'm playing. Where do you guys stand on rosewood versus maple?
I've actually got some interesting stuff on that. I'm a rosewood guy, like through and through. Definitely with Strat. So Telly's, I feel like the Blackguard pickups are a little darker, so that's kind of another thing. But in terms of Strats, like I've always been a rosewood guy, but here I am with a maple, right? Yeah, it's got the stripe in the back. But with any Fender neck, a lot of guys do the thing where you take the finish off. That drastically changes the sound of the guitar, like big time. So whereas a normal maple neck with the finish on it would have that brighter, snappy thing that I'm not a fan of, the previous owner of this guitar had it, relicked, or kind of poorly relicked, honestly, but took the finish off all this back part of the neck and some of this part here, and it's actually sometimes when you take too much off, it kind of has this gummy sound and it kind of kills the vibe. But for some reason with this guitar, I don't know if it's because the wood's a little bit older or something, just kind of maple sound. So it's still got that kind of bright, immediate maple thing, but the lack of finish on this one has kind of dulled it down a little bit. So it's a little bit closer to rosewood, and I actually really like the sound of this. So that's a little rosewood versus maple theory for you.
That's pretty crafty.
It's really interesting. Yeah, some of these
great.
like things you get into with like relicking fenders and pulling the finish off, like it really changes the tone, at least in my experience.
So I played neither of those guitars are down here, but I like my old guitars were basically I've got it. Well, it's upstairs. It's an old Charvel, at least the maple neck, and it's ever so slightly on the edge of gummy, but not too far into that. And the other one was a Telly on a Strat body, but it's really interesting what you're talking about because, and I hadn't really stupidly ever thought of it. The finish on the neck, it really does change the character, and it also obviously changes the touch of it. I've usually, it's kind of funny you talk about the sight, and for me the tactile sense of the sanded or never actually finished Charvel style necks, I love those. But it's an interesting phenomenon to have that neck where you have the sound and the feel of that. The other thing about that is, I've got a Nash Telly or a T63 that is one of those instruments that it's got a rosewood board on it, but the back of the neck is slightly, it's kind of worn down, and that's it's one of those guitars that pretty much everybody picks it up and plays is like, oh snap, I want to go home with your guitar.
Yeah.
Mason, what you got for us on Michael, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Uncle Mason, I want to hear his thoughts. He no doubt he's got some real set theology on something like that.
Well, again, I think it's one of those things that's a taste preference. To me, also another feature of maple that I noticed is it tends to be better for funk. It tends to be a little more staccato, or like it has this element to it that I think can be good for certain things. But I do think that there's ways to sort of balance maple as well. Like, I was listening to some of that Eric Johnson's newest Strat that he has, and he was talking about how on his original 54, to make it kind of less bright and balanced, he would change the saddles to Graphtec ones on the higher B and E strings so that it would kind of mellow it out and make it less bright, like a maple, like a 54 Strat would be. And I found that to be a very interesting
Wow.
thing. Like there are ways that you can, take a maple Strat, and as you said, you can remove some of the finish that's going to stack the deck, toward this other end. You change, your E string to a Vertex saddle that's going to move it further away.
Yeah.
I usually, I usually like to have the guitars have kind of one of each, and I have a 57 custom shop that's a heavy relic that sounds great, and I've had it for probably 10 years, and it's been on a ton of our videos, and it's great. And then I have that Roy Gallagher one for a 60s one, and they have fundamentally different sounds. Like if I was going to go for an Eric Johnson thing, I wouldn't use that guitar, by a mile, because it just doesn't seem to have the same sort of generate the same clean tone. But I prefer Rosewood because I like playing kind of bluesier R&B, and that guitar was just more consistent with that era. It's just like, not that there is different as this comparison that I'm going to make, but it's like you don't go off roading in your Mazda Miata. You got the right.
Not sober, you don't.
There's some people that would throw some big old 37s on that Miata and just go full send. So
Get that rear wheel drive going.
Oh my word.
So they're tools. You get your hammer, and you got your wrench, and you got so they're just different tools, and so I don't think of them as differences, things that there's some crossover, obviously, if you want a Strat sound, but you want to sound like Buddy Holly or something like that, you're going to reach for your classic 50 Strat. Want to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, get a Strat.
Well, you went there. So this is the Virginia Strat.
Oh,
so the really interesting thing is that this is actually the guitar, quote unquote, that's on that. Then there's two of the Austin City Limits ones. There's an earlier one where he's got this kind of a little bit of chorus to the tone, whether it's in the reverb or on the. It's one of the most amazing guitar sounds ever.
Yeah, he's got those TC Electronic stereo chorus flanger pitch shifters.
But I don't think the TC is on the Marshall tone. So that's what's really interesting. I think he's got some modulation on the MXR. Sorry, now we're going there again. I think he's got some modulation on the MXR reverb on that one.
Okay.
But it is my favorite version of it. And maybe what I'll do is I can't play it because I'll get copyright struck. But
just play it all major instead of minor.
I'll find it so I can quote what the version is, and I can post it in the threads and people can get to it.
So that one has the Vertex saddle on the E.
It does not. Now that I've forgotten about that. I was looking at this thing. I was like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah. See, look at that Vertex saddle.
That's hilarious.
Michael Mason nailed it once again.
And so the interesting thing about this guitar is I used it on a solo Dallas demo for the nothing personal, Mason. I'm sure you're a fan of their stuff, but the little white boosty guy, which is basically like the part of the tower, and this guitar's
wireless.
What's that?
Part of the Schaefer wireless unit.
Yes. Yeah. It's the Schaefer Boost. In fact, it's an MXR compressor. It's here somewhere. Not in the reverb pile. But the thing is that this guy's got a hum canceling, narrow aperture humbucking pickup that I'm 99.9% positive is a Steve Blucher designed DiMarzio, and this guitar in the bridge position flipping smokes. But the interesting thing is, it's like I'm a huge fan of the vintage V's. This one's just actually a giant kind of a C, and this is a manly neck, and that's actually, while we're back on the Strat thing, what I like about this, actually what I love about it, is some of them, there's the C shape, and I'm not going to be able to show it very well, but the way you can kind of see it's gently round versus ones that get a little bit of a heel that's more of a pronounced D shape. I can't get my thumb around the top of the neck for the Hendrix chords on the one that have that D shape. So I didn't mention this before, but the one thing, I'll never buy a Strat or borrow one that has that pronounced D shape on it, because I just can't get to the Hendrix chord. So I'm constantly trying to get to that spot where I'm like, I can't play the guitar. It's crazy.
I'm returning your birthday gift, I guess.
What's that?
Said I'm returning your birthday gift.
Oh, bummer.
Can't handle the thick C shape.
No, I don't have a problem with the C shape. It's the D though, where that thing. But this is, the interesting thing about this is that the neck is finished, and I'm at some point I'm going to get Eric on the other show, and I'll be very curious to talk with him because I'm 99% positive that Virginia does not have the lacquer on the back of the neck. There's no way that guitar did, and it's got little pieces of the pick guard missing. And the edges of the pickup covers are all kind of dog-eared where they've cracked, and all that. It's an interesting thing. I had a conversation with now that I've forgotten his name, I can't mention his role, but one of the very cool guys at Fender, and I was talking about being able to hear the difference between a 3-ply and a one ply pick guard, which this will be a one. No. Yeah, it's a 1-ply. There you go. And they actually sound different. And again, because the pickups are actually mounted to the pick guard, they're going to transduce the attack of the pick guard into the pickup. There's a vibration that happens, and a 1-ply as opposed to a 3-ply pick guard actually, I said I can feel the difference and I can hear the difference. He said, no, absolutely. You want to geek out? Maybe our last geek out, unless we just kind of keep going, even though I said that we were stopping.
Yeah, let's go lick some 9-volt batteries. It's like Eric Johnson.
Well, the funny thing is, have you guys used the orange their tube tester?
No.
It's the VT100, Valve Tester 100. It's actually really cool because, the interesting thing is that, Michael, you were talking about new strings. Sometimes it's not always a matter of like the new tube actually being the way you want it. Sometimes it's the tube that's been played a bunch. Yeah. That's kind of like, it's not at the perfect spot where you're like, it's not quite as accurate as when you put new tubes in. You're like, oh, my amp is back. Thoughts? Tubes? Pick guards?
Yeah, I mean, when I took one of my amps, I have an early 65 amps London. It's kind of like the first boutique thing I ever bought when I was younger. I took it to an amp tech in town because I was having trouble getting the EF86 to stay working, and he kind of ragged on me a bit for having JJs in it, and I started talking to him about it for a little while. And he's like, yeah, there's just no vibe in these things, man. I like tubes that are like a little microphonic and have a little more sauce going on. I was like, well, okay, yeah. Tubes again, it's just another preference, like strings, and for me, it kind of depends on the amp. Tubes obviously change over their period of time in an amp, so it's kind of another learning curve. Like strings, it's a lot faster. Like, okay, I like my strings, after 3 days, but like amps could be like, oh man, like, I need my, set of JJs ordered from, Euro tubes or whatever to be 3 months old before they're great. And then you get into things of, how you bias the tube and all that kind of stuff. You bias hot, you like to bias cold. I mean, it's all personal preference stuff. Do you want to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on NOS tubes, or do you want to get new tubes? Me personally, I've found I've had good success throwing JJs in my amps for the most part. They seem to be pretty consistent in the way they sound. But, even so, sometimes it's like, oh, my Ace T30 likes to run a little gainy. So do I try 12AU7 in that V1 position? Or in a lot of amps, I like to use a 5751 in V1. That was kind of a trick we did with a lot of the ProSonic amps for the full stuff, as we put a 5751 in the V1 position, and that would kind of give it the balls and the girthy thing that made those amps sound kind of big. So it's again, it's personal preference and what you feel makes that piece of equipment speak its best, or makes it speak to you.
Which amp did you mention that you put that in?
We used it's kind of this weird Fender amp. I think it's a Bruce Zinke design. And a lot of like Fender guys hate on it because it was Fender's attempt at doing like the Mesa Boogie channel switching thing. It's the Fender Pro Sonic. It was a custom shop amp in the 90s. But our again, a front of house engineer, Chris Greeley, who's a phenomenal guitar player, he had one, and we ended up using it in the studio for a bunch of tracks because it like his sounded great. And he was like, yeah, I just found this amp and I put a 5751 in the V1 position. It sounds awesome. And so, yeah, we bought them up because you could get them cheap at the time. It's fairly safe to say we might be the ones responsible for driving the price of those up in recent years because a boatload of church guys have started playing them.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it was just these little 90s, custom shop Fender amps that a bunch of like vintage Fender guys would kind of rag on and be like, oh man, I'll take my 60s Bassman over that piece of junk any day. But we'd put that tube in it, and the volume would be on like, it'd be under 2, like it'd be really, really low, but it just had this big, really full, clean sound. And I mean, I thought they sounded great. I used that in the Korg AC30 on pretty much like almost every recording and almost every tour we did. And yeah,
lots of people are like on reverb right now, which is like driving up the price. There you go again. That's awesome. Mason?
Well, good luck, because I even have a hard time finding them sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer that question first. How do you find old stock tubes? Because the problem is that all the old stock stuff that you can get now, people need to realize that it's the bottom of the barrel. All of the good stuff has been graded out. If it's an NOS that was worth having, that met anybody's noise requirement, it's been sorted. So a lot of times when you're buying old stock stuff, you're getting stuff that's gone through 20, 30 different sorts from different people who have had those tubes, different manufacturers that have those tubes that didn't meet the criteria. So a lot of times they're not that great, or they have a very limited life, or they're already pretty microphonic to the point where they're unusable. So here's the secret from Uncle Mason. There is frequently and often on Craigslist listings for free church organs that they're giving away. Church organs are full of vacuum tubes. And so what I often do is I will go to, I'll contact the person who's got some of these for sale. I'll say, hey, I'm in this career, and I could really use the tubes that are inside of this, and I'm happy to pay the hauling fee, because most of these, I'm just looking for ones that they're giving away for free. If you let me, harvest the usable tubes out of this thing. And I've been able to get, 7, 8, 12 AX7s out of some of these things, so preamp tubes. And then another thing that I do is I'll buy 70s era Fenders that have a lot of power amp tubes, so like Bandmasters, Showman, stuff like that, that's not really high dollar Fender, but still has, RCA tubes in them most of the time, if they're original. And I just retube them and resell them. I mean, I find them like at a good price, where they're $400 or $500 for a Bandmaster head, or $400 or $500 for a Showman head that's from the late 70s. I'm getting those vintage tubes, I'm retubing them with JJs, and then I'm just selling them for what I paid, and keeping the original tubes. So that's the best way to do them. I know it's a lot of work, but if you get yourself a Showman and you only have 50-watt Fenders, that's 2 retubes for you, in terms of power tubes if it's got 6L6s. So that's usually the technique that I've been using to do that. But in terms of new tubes, the way that tubes are designed, all the tubes, they're made in 2 different places. They're either made in a factory in China or a factory in Russia, because tube manufacturing is so toxic, that most countries don't even want to touch it. And yeah, so the difficulty is because the same shops are making the tubes for everybody. that the quality control is tricky, because when one manufacturer is complaining about the quality of their tubes, then they spend more time on brand X's tubes, and then the other ones suffer. And so I found that buying tubes new reliably is really tricky, because it's sort of like the exterminator that runs the rats out of your house and puts them in their neighbor's house, and then the neighbor calls the exterminator and they run the rats back into your house. And so I find that, like, yeah, JJs are good, and then 6 months later you start getting batches of JJs which are all terrible, but now all the TAD tubes are great. And a lot of the technician friends that I have that are servicing amps all the time, they've told me that it's like this revolving door. It's like, Q1, all the JJs are great, but then in Q2, now the tube amp doctor ones are the ones to get it. And then in Q3, you go to, groove tubes or what, fill in the blank, for what it is. So I haven't found that the new ones, I mean, if you get ones that are working and stable, like, you can get them to sound okay, but a pair of JJs isn't going to sound as good as, an old RCA or something like that, or a Jan Phillips or whatever it is. It's not, but I mean, you can get close. I think biasing around 60% for me is usually where I like to kind of have it hot, and that's going to, use up your tubes faster. But it's sort of one of those things. It's like, do you want your tubes to live a long and unencumbered life, or do you want them to have, you want them to be partying in Vegas every time you turn on your amp, and maybe they don't live as long, but it's sounding great all the time.
I've never heard that analogy, but it is certainly colorful. So
I'm full of analogies tonight. I don't know where it came from.
No, that's good. That is apropos. Gentlemen, and everybody that's hung out, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hugh, I saw you pop in there from Germany. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me see. Let me do a last little roll here and see if I can tell who's actually still on here, and just say goodnight. And thank you so much for hanging out with us. Ken, Pedro, Mark, MV, Jesse Johnson. I don't think it's Jesse Johnson from the time, but if it is, major props, dude. And if it's not, major props, dude. Henry, Gary, hey, thank you. Really appreciate it. Jonas, thanks so much. Awesome. Okay, let me jump over to Facebook real quick. There we go. Come on, mouse. There we go. Almost there. Okay, and Aaron Buchholz, what's going on, dude? Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. How you doing, Buck? That's awesome. Got to be in touch, dude. And let's see. Oh, Gary, what's going on, Gary? I do have the VT100 power tube tester. How do you? Oh, do you by chance have a tube? I do. So the VT100 test power amp tubes and preamp tubes. It's actually really cool. And the reason I mention it is it allows you to actually, if you get to a point where your tube's life and you're like, that sounds amazing, you can actually take a measurement of it and see approximately how that actual tube measures. So you go to find a replacement for it, you're at least remotely in the ballpark, at least so I believed. Phil, thank you so much. And oh, come on, here we go. Rick, Jack, thank you so much. Nate, worship musician. Those guys they're on the thread too. Oh, that's me. All right, gentlemen. Michael, always a pleasure. This was every bit as great as I anticipated and most hoped. So thank you for that.
Thank you, man. Likewise, I had a great time.
Oh, that's awesome. And Mason, ditto. You guys, just thank you. Really, this has been a real joy. So thank you for that, Michael. Are there any recordings that we can expect to hear you on that are kind of queued up to come out anytime soon?
It's all stuff I'm working on right now, so I'll have to get back to you on that. I'd have a list to you, but COVID kind of delayed some of those things. So at a later date, we can reconvene on that.
That sounds great. Mason, are there any things in the hopper? I know you can't talk about them specifically, but when might we expect another pedal offering?
Well, I don't have any pedal offerings that I can speak about yet, but we do have our pedal boards that are going to be releasing in the next few weeks. And so we have 4 different size surfaces with the hinged version of the Strymon bridge So it actually can go up, to a full 90 degrees, and we'll have 11 different size risers that you can attach that have that same feature to the 4 different size platforms. They're all designed to go in Pelican Air cases or SKB cases. The whole intent is no matter how many pedals you put on it, it would still be under the 55-pound travel limit, so you could take it anywhere in the world, be able to check it, and you would know that it would be able to be safe. And that's kind of what we're going for, is sort of a travelable professional solution for people. Super lightweight. It has all the things that we've been doing on our YouTube channel, the Rig Doctor channel, for the last year plus, and kind of put all that into a product. So those will be releasing and available at Sweetwater and kind of all of our dealerships, Chicago Music Exchange, things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. With pleasure. Awesome. Great to connect. Gentlemen, and any ladies that are out there and gentlemen that are out there, thanks so much for hanging out. Have a great night. Thanks so much. God bless.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.